Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Failene Grant. In 2001, a man called 911 for help with. When paramedics arrived, they quickly assisted Failene Grant and took her to the hospital, where she was placed on life support. It was hoped that she would regain consciousness and explain what had happened. But her condition continued to deteriorate. Eventually, her brain activity stopped, and her husband, Doug Grant, made the difficult decision to disconnect her life support on September 27, 2001. Failene passed away. Doug remembers waking up and not finding his wife lying beside him, hearing the sound of running water in the bathroom. He became worried because she had been gone for so long. When he checked on her, he found Failene unconscious and lying face down in the water. He pulled her out and administered CPR until help arrived. The medical examiner ruled her death an accident, but noted in his report that the exact cause had not yet been determined. The examiner found no evidence of a struggle or any signs of foul play on her body, however. The police conducted a thorough investigation as they looked into the circumstances surrounding Failene's death. They began to suspect that she may have drowned. It is worth noting that Failene was described as a deeply religious person, according to her religious beliefs. Taking one's own life is considered a serious sin, according to her husband, before her death. Failene shared a story that God was preparing her for death. In light of this, she decided to purchase life insurance, hoping it would support her loved ones after her passing. Additionally, she planned her funeral. Selecting the details and choosing the music, it was clear that Failene had given her death significant thought. Even giving her husband permission to remarry after her death, Doug expressed his undying love for Failene. Describing their marriage as strong and loving, Doug and Failene's love story began in 1993 when they met at a gym near Phoenix. At the time, Doug was divorced, and Failene was a beautiful single mother. Both had been through unsuccessful relationships, which helped them bond. They began dating, and their relationship quickly progressed. Leading to marriage just 4 months later, they both maintained their health through proper nutrition and regular exercise. They were devoutly religious and were members of the Mormon Church together. They had 2 sons, in addition to 2 children from previous marriages. Creating a large family of 6, Doug successfully launched a supplement business and later became a sports nutrition consultant. He achieved many milestones, which brought him considerable wealth, allowing his family to live comfortably without financial concerns, however. Doug had one significant flaw. He was unfaithful. Over time, Failene grew increasingly suspicious of his behavior. Though Doug denied everything, Failene was deeply hurt, especially because of her strong religious beliefs. In her eyes, his actions were a grave sin, despite her pain. She chose to stay in the marriage for the sake of their children, unfortunately. Things did not improve, and Doug continued to be unfaithful. Eventually, Doug confessed to having affairs with 6 women, which became the breaking point for Failene. In 2000, she decided to file for divorce. It was an extremely painful and difficult decision for her because she still loved her husband, according to Failene's friends. She cried almost every night after the divorce. Failene moved out with their children. Doug appeared satisfied with this arrangement and quickly began a relationship with Hillary DeWitt, a 19-year-old from Louisiana. Their romantic relationship began shortly after the divorce. Doug often told his friends that he would never marry again. However, after working with Hillary for a few weeks, he realized he could not live without her. Hillary, a young employee at his company, accepted his advances, and their relationship developed over several months. Doug was reportedly planning to propose to Hillary, but everything changed in August 2001. Failene called Doug and asked to meet with him for an important conversation. During their meeting, Failene revealed that while in a Mormon town she had recently visited, she had a vision in which God told her to remarry Doug. Shocked by this revelation, Doug took some time to reflect and eventually agreed to reconcile after their discussion. Doug called Hillary and confessed that he had decided to get back together with his ex-wife just a few days later. Doug and Failene were in a Las Vegas church, exchanging vows and officially becoming husband and wife once again. At the time, Hillary was still in love with Doug and did not want to end their relationship, as the police investigated the circumstances surrounding Failene's death. They began to suspect that it was not an accident, but something far more sinister. A love triangle may have been the motive for the murder, and the police began investigating the final months of Failene's life. Another theory under consideration was that Doug, or his young lover, Hillary, might have been involved in Failene's death. However, investigators needed strong evidence to support this claim. Upon further investigation, police found no disputes over property, custody, or financial matters. Doug and Failene had reconciled, and there seemed to be no apparent reason for Doug to want Failene dead. Doug also provided police with valuable information about a diary Failene had kept. Doug seems to have no intention of leaving Hillary. Even after marrying Failene for the second time, they continue to see each other even after Failene's death. In her diary, Failene shares her views on faith and family. The police discover that Hillary has been repeatedly calling Doug when they check her phone records. Doug claims that their conversations revolve around Failene's worrying condition, but the police suspect that there may be something more disturbing behind those calls. Additionally, Failene remains unaware of Doug and Hillary's affair. Her diary contains reflections on her life. Instead of expressing a desire to end her life, she writes that her inevitable fate has shown her a future in which she will not become a devout Mormon. She accepts her fate and seems to face it calmly. On September 7, she spoke to her sisters and mentioned that, just 6 days earlier, she felt as if she had met the Grim Reaper. Failene was even surprised to find herself still alive. On September 17, she contacted all her relatives again and said goodbye. Stating that she would be leaving soon, she even discussed her feelings with her physical therapist, who suggested that she focus less on these thoughts and more on positive things. The therapist believed that her anxiety was due to stress. During questioning, Doug recounted the details of the morning he found his wife dead. He explained that he had been struggling with insomnia, which led him to take sleeping pills that had been recommended and prescribed by a doctor friend. Doug could not understand how Failene could have drowned in the bathtub. He believes that her death was an accident, or that she may have ended her own life. Failene's sister contacted the police with important information. An old friend of Doug's claimed that Doug had confessed to him about killing his wife. Doug explained that he believed his wife was ready to die, so he put her in the bathtub, which led to her drowning. However, the witness asked Failene's family for Dollarton to testify. The police met with the man and convinced him to assist the investigation without any payment. He agreed and invited a friend to join him, secretly recording their conversation. Although the man tried various tactics to get Doug to confess, Doug never explicitly admitted to his crime, however. Doug's nervous behavior and evasive responses raised suspicion. In the summer of 2005, police arrested Doug, charging him with Failene's murder. He quickly posted bail and returned home while awaiting trial. It was not until 7 years after Failene's death that Doug finally appeared in court. The trial lasted 4 months and attracted considerable media attention. During the trial, Failene's family and friends stated that she showed no signs of mental health problems or depression. Failene did not use drugs or alcohol and remained calm until her final days. The prosecution found Doug's behavior after the incident to be suspicious. During questioning, he claimed to have called 911 himself, but in fact, it was the doctor who prescribed the medication that morning who made the call after conducting toxicology tests. The results showed that Failene's blood contained enough sedatives to prevent her from moving around the house. This supported the theory that Doug had placed her in a bathtub filled with water, causing her to drown. Surprisingly, Failene's eldest daughter reported to the police that she saw her stepfather take her mother into a room and close the door at that time. The girl had no idea what was happening inside and did not witness her mother being submerged in water, which is why she initially did not provide any information to the police. Years later, Failene's daughter was determined to seek justice for her mother after realizing what had happened. She felt extremely guilty about the situation. Doug did not pay attention to her daughter and was unaware that she was awake at that hour. She did not know that her mother was dying right behind the door. Now, with a heavy heart, she regrets not trying to knock and enter the room, believing that it could have saved Failene's life, however. She also understands that this could have put her own safety at risk. Doug's attorney argued that the police were determined to blame Doug, which led to serious errors and irregularities in the investigation. The defense pointed out that much of the evidence relied upon was of poor quality. In fact, a significant amount of the evidence collected was lost or destroyed, including Failene's clothing and medications. This was attributed to the incompetence of the forensic scientists and police involved in the case. In addition, none of Failene's diary entries were presented for review. The attorney mentioned that a new life insurance policy had been issued to Failene, but it had not been in effect at the time of her death. The attorney argued that if Doug had wanted to marry Hillary, he would not have needed to kill Failene to achieve this. They could have simply divorced. As they had done before, the defense contended that Doug had no strong motive to kill his wife. However, the prosecution maintained that Doug had cruelly manipulated Failene, causing her to appear insane due to her religious beliefs, thereby creating the illusion of her own voluntary decision to end her life. Hillary supported Doug throughout the trial and asked for his acquittal. Failene had sent letters to Hillary shortly before her death, urging her to marry Doug and adopt her children a few weeks after the tragedy. Hillary complied with this request and adopted Failene and Doug's 2 children. Failene's 2 children from her first marriage went to live with their biological father during her marriage to Doug. Hillary had a daughter. Throughout their 7 years together, Hillary felt the disapproving eyes of others who considered her a family destroyer. However, Hillary claimed that Doug had never treated her cruelly. The prosecution argued that Doug did not seem to mourn his wife Failene after her death. Just hours after the tragedy, he visited Hillary, leaning against her car, hugging her, and whispering affectionate words. This behavior did not appear consistent with that of a grieving person. Doug's daughter, who expressed her concerns in court, alleged that Doug had brainwashed her mother into believing that death was a natural part of God's plan, causing Failene to prepare for her own death. After lengthy deliberations, the jury found Doug Grant guilty of second-degree murder, and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of McKenzie Sharilla. McKenzie Sharilla was born in August 2004 in Strongsville, Ohio. The youngest of 3 children, McKenzie received a lot of love and pampering from her parents, John Sharilla and Natalie Stevens. Her parents prioritized her education and encouraged she to pursue every goal she loved. Being the youngest also gave her a tolerance. She was often forgiven for many of her mischievous pranks during her childhood, and even when she committed some more serious mistakes, she would still be forgiven by her parents. McKenzie grew up as a spoiled and entitled girl who often got her way. Her parents gave in to her demands, which led her to believe she could act however she wanted without consequence. As a young child, she was kind and friendly, but as she grew older, her behavior and character began to deteriorate. If things didn't go her way, she would throw tantrums, lose her temper, and use bad language. She was prone to physical altercations and would often disregard others. McKenzie only cared about her own opinions and desires, insisted on getting her way, and prioritized her own interests above all else. During his teenage years, McKenzie became very difficult and unbearable personality, but her parents never thought it was out of the ordinary. To them, her behavior was a normal part of growing up and a phase she would eventually outgrow. They chose to respond with understanding and patience. However, McKenzie's behavior worsened over time. In high school, she started using alcohol and occasionally experimenting with illicit drugs, often managing to avoid consequences for her actions. Her reckless behavior not only endangers herself but also the people around her. McKenzie's parents seemed to be unaware of, or possibly chose to ignore, the obvious issues their daughter was facing. Like many teenagers, she was glued to her smartphone and frequently posted provocative photos and comments on social media. Her actions weren't unusual among her friends, as they often engaged in vandalism, fought, stole, and had run-ins with the police. However, they rarely faced serious consequences, typically receiving only warnings and educational discussions, which may have led them to believe that they could act as they pleased without facing repercussions. Dominic Russo, a young man from Strongsville, was a stark contrast to McKenzie. Born in September 2001, he was the 4th of 7 children to Frank and Christine Russo. Growing up, Dominic was close to his 3 brothers and 3 sisters. He was an exemplary student, actively participated in sports, and prioritized a healthy lifestyle. Throughout his childhood, Dominic excelled academically, participated in sports, and prioritized a healthy lifestyle. Despite being part of a large family, Dominic and his siblings never lacked parental love, attention, or care. Frank and Christine Russo were moderately strict but also supportive of their children's interests. As a result, Dominic always had a lot of friends and was accustomed to being the center of attention. His attractive appearance and charming personality made him a popular figure, and he had many admirers from a young age. However, Dominic preferred to focus on meaningful relationships rather than fleeting romances. After completing high school, Dominic attended a local university, specializing in performing arts with a focus on music production. His ambition was to become a renowned music producer, and he was also a skilled singer-songwriter. By the time he was 20, Dominic had established his own business, purchased a car, and was living in a rented apartment in a good neighborhood. Additionally, he excelled as a student and athlete at the university. Dominic first met McKenzie at a mutual friend's party. This chance encounter turned out to be pivotal for both of them. As complete opposites, they found themselves drawn to each other. Dominic, with his charming and cultured demeanor, quickly caught McKenzie's eye. He was distinctly different from the people she normally socialized with, possessing qualities that set him apart. He was well-educated, well-mannered, and engaging, able to effortlessly converse on a wide range of topics. McKenzie had a striking appearance and a slender figure that caught people's attention. She knew how to present herself and often relied on her charm to make an impression. McKenzie quickly won over the guy she had been interested in, Dominic, and by fall 2021, they started dating. Not long after that, the two introduced each other to their families. While McKenzie's parents were thrilled with her choice, considering the guy an excellent match for their daughter, Dominic's parents had mixed feelings about McKenzie. They found her endearing and innocent at first, but there was something about her that immediately raised concerns for Frank and Christine Russo. Those close to McKenzie believed she had truly fallen in love for the first time, and they hoped this relationship would have a positive impact on her life. Unfortunately, no one could have predicted the tragic endings that would eventually bring their romance to an end. As McKenzie and Dominic spent more time together, they began to appear in public, holding hands and showing affection for each other. It wasn't long before the entire small town knew about their relationship. While some people who knew McKenzie well felt sorry for her boyfriend, Dominic, most were simply happy for the couple. As time passed, Dominic started to notice strange behavior in McKenzie. She was constantly defiant and tried to get everyone to do what she wanted. At first, Dominic thought her behavior was due to her youth and desire for attention. Despite her behavior, the couple made plans for their future, discussing marriage as soon as McKenzie turned 18. They also hoped to leave their small town and move to a big city, such as New York, where Dominic could pursue a music career and showcase his talent. Over time, McKenzie's behavior became increasingly alarming and sometimes frightening to Dominic. She asks him to do what she wants, and if he doesn't agree with her, she gets angry and acts very nasty. Dominic initially disregarded McKenzie's controlling behavior as a joking matter, but then he soon realized her true nature. In public, she maintained a composed exterior, but when they were alone, she took out her anger on him and sometimes attacked him. Dominic felt he couldn't stand his girlfriend any longer and proposed a temporary separation to reconsider their feelings. However, McKenzie responded by having a very breakdown in front of their mutual friends. She yelled, threatened to harm Dominic if he ended the relationship, and even threatened to burn down his house and wreck his car. These actions had the opposite effect of what McKenzie intended. This makes Dominic even more want to end their toxic relationship. McKenzie was determined to hold on to her boyfriend, refusing to acknowledge the end of the relationship. Initially, she acted as though nothing was wrong, continuing to call Dominic and invite him to various parties and events. She also posted affectionate photos of the two on social media, express her love for him. However, when Dominic made it clear that the relationship was over, McKenzie's behavior changed. She became furious and began showing up at his house almost daily, standing under his window and shouting insults and threats. She also resorted to calling him from different phone numbers, leaving messages on his answering machine, and sending emails. In these messages, McKenzie's tone was inconsistent. Sometimes she will gently express her feelings for him and offer to restart the relationship. However, there are times when she will use insults and threats against Dominic. Dominic was baffled by McKenzie's behavior, having never experienced anything similar before. He struggled to respond and tried various approaches, including talking to her and ignoring her. He also documented her aggressive outbursts using his phone. The situation became unbearable as McKenzie would publicly scream at and insult Dominic whenever she saw him, making his life extremely difficult. Despite this, Dominic held on to the hope that with time, McKenzie would eventually leave him alone and move on. McKenzie made a shocking statement in front of witnesses, saying it would be easier for her to kill Dominic than to let him move on from her. She threatened that if he didn't return to her, she would make sure no one else could have him. At first, Dominic didn't take her words seriously, but those around him knew she was not joking. Her threats also included hitting and running him over with a car, driving him off a cliff, or stopping on railroad tracks in front of an oncoming train. She described each scenario in detail, as if she had already planned it out. However, McKenzie soon realized that her threats and insults only pushed Dominic further away. She decided to change her tactics, switching from being aggressive to being sweet and charming again. She stopped pressuring and harassing Dominic and pretended to have learned from her mistakes, wanting to change for the better. She started talking about college plans, asking for his help in choosing a university, and claiming that she had become more focused on her studies, particularly her upcoming final exams. Dominic was pleasantly surprised by the changes in McKenzie and, still having feelings for her, he decided to help her with her university enrollment. As they started seeing each other again, they gradually rekindled their closeness. Dominic began taking her on dates and spending all his free time with her, thinking she had become more mature and responsible. He fell in love with her again without even realizing it, and their past issues seemed to fade away. This time, they kept their reunion private and didn't tell their friends and acquaintances about it. Therefore, their dates are private and discreet, allowing them to enjoy their time together without seeking outside attention. When Dominic's brother Angelo found out, he warned that nothing good would come of it. But Dominic didn't listen because he loved her too much, so he didn't pay attention to his brother's words. Dominic thinks that McKenzie has changed positively after they reunited, but he had no idea what she was really planning. Unbeknownst to him, McKenzie had devised a sinister plan to exact revenge on he. She became obsessed with the idea of a disastrous car accident. She would spend her free time traveling around the city and looking for the perfect place to carry out her plan. McKenzie considered crashing into a steep cliff or stepping in front of the train, but she couldn't find cliff nearby and thought the idea of blocking the train was untrustworthy. One day, while driving through an industrial area, she stumbled upon a secluded spot with no cameras or traffic. A massive brick wall caught her attention, and her twisted imagination quickly conjured up a new and equally horrific plan. She decided that accelerating to top speed and crashing into the wall would be just as spectacular as the other ideas she had considered. Initially, McKenzie had planned to end her life alongside her lover, Dominic, intending for their tragic story to become a cautionary tale for the entire city. She had confided in her best friend about this plan, but her friend thought she was joking because she had had such wild ideas before. In late July 2022, just days before McKenzie's 18th birthday, she asked Dominic if he wanted to attend a mutual friend's party with her. She told him that it would be the perfect opportunity for them to have some fun, relax, and make it clear to everyone that they were back together and deeply in love. Dominic quickly agreed, as he still trusted McKenzie and didn't question her feelings or intentions. On the night of July 30th, Dominic and McKenzie arriving at the party holding hands. Their entrance caught everyone's attention, and they looked happy and in love as they openly displayed their affection for each other. Their friends were genuinely thrilled to see them reunited but notice how well-suited the couple was. When night fell, Dominic and McKenzie freely took photos, kissed and enjoyed their time together without any hesitation. However, no one had any idea that this joyful celebration would take a devastating turn. Dominic and McKenzie drank some alcohol, like other people at that party, but McKenzie secretly took a dose of illegal drugs, for courage, to not change her mind at the last minute and slammed on the brakes. The next morning, Dominic and McKenzie bid farewell to the guests and began to head out to their car. However, they were approached by a friend of the guy, Davion Flanagan, who requested a ride home in their vehicle. McKenzie tried to decline request, said that they had made other plans, but Dominic didn't see any problem with driving his friend home. McKenzie eventually relented, and she agreed to give Davion a ride home. McKenzie took the driver's seat, with Dominic beside her and Davion behind him. They left the party venue and headed onto the main road. McKenzie drove cautiously, adhering to the speed limit and avoiding drawing attention to themselves. When they approached an empty intersection, she stopped at the red light. As they waited, Davion dozed off, allowing her to reconsider her intentions. In her later statement, McKenzie claimed she had planned to die in an accident, but her words were discredited by the fact that she had buckled her seatbelt during the previous stop, while Davion remained unbuckled. As the light turned green, McKenzie suddenly accelerated and took a sharp turn onto a poorly lit secondary road that led into an industrial area. Dominic and Davion seemed unaware of what was happening, and the car sped up as if McKenzie had lost control. Pressing hard on the gas pedal, she careened the vehicle toward a brick wall. Luckily, a witness happened to be in the area. On an early Sunday morning, the industrial area was deserted, with no other people around to see the accident or offer assistance. However, a woman who lived near the scene heard the crash and went outside to find out what's happening. Seeing smoke and realizing a car had crashed, she quickly returned to her home to call for emergency help. About 30 minutes after the accident, medics arrived at the scene. Unfortunately, Davion and Dominic in the car succumbed to their injuries and died instantly. McKenzie, however, was fortunate to have survived thanks to her seatbelt and airbags. McKenzie, the driver, was unconscious and trapped in the wreckage with severe leg injuries, but she was breathing and had a palpable pulse, giving hope that she will survive. During the process of being freed from the car, McKenzie briefly regained consciousness but she appeared disoriented and unaware of her surroundings. Once released from the vehicle, she was immediately rushed to the hospital for treatment. At the hospital, doctors diagnosed McKenzie with multiple fractures and viscera injuries. Blood tests also revealed that she had been under the influence of both alcohol and drugs at the time of the accident. The police initially received leads and a confession in the investigation. After learning the results of McKenzie's tests, it was thought that she was under the influence of addictive substances and didn't understand her actions. It's possible she tried to drive through the wall or didn't notice any obstacles, as there was no sign of braking. Since McKenzie was unconscious in the intensive care unit after a complex operation, the police couldn't question her at first. When she regained consciousness, she became hysterical and confessed to the doctor, saying she deliberately crashed into the wall to kill Dominic and initially intended to die with him. McKenzie also said that Dave was an unintended victim because he was hitchhiking in their car. Doctors dismissed McKenzie's confession, believing it was a delusional state caused by anesthesia, painkillers, and grief over her boyfriend's death. However, when the police spoke with McKenzie, her story changed completely. This time, McKenzie said she remembered almost nothing about the incident of that night due to consuming alcohol and using illegal substances. McKenzie claimed she had a memory lapse after getting in the car and had no idea how Davion ended up in the car. However, evidence contradicted this. Surveillance footage tracked the car's initial route and showed McKenzie driving cautiously and following the rules until she suddenly turned onto a road leading to an industrial area. Furthermore, it was discovered that McKenzie had previously driven the entire route days earlier, and her car had been spotted by multiple witnesses. After being discharged from the hospital, McKenzie quickly recovered and attempted to resume her disinterested life. She showed no remorse for her actions and was confident about evading consequences. She became active on social media again, met with friends, and made future plans. By September, she even attended a concert in a nearby city, featuring her favorite band, seemed unaffected by her boyfriend's passing. McKenzie lived an active life despite having her legs in a fragile state. She would often appear at concerts in a wheelchair, wearing vibrant makeup and taking selfies to share on social media. Just a month after recovering, McKenzie attended a Halloween party in a pre-made costume where she met new people and enjoyed herself. However, her life has changed completely on November 4, 2022, when she was taken into custody. The investigation gathered enough evidence to bring the case to trial. McKenzie was charged with premeditated aggravated double murder and possession of a controlled substance found in her pocket and detected in her blood. However, During the trial, McKenzie changed her testimony multiple times. Initially, she claimed to have memory loss, but when her friend testified against her, revealing her plan, she shifted her defense. McKenzie then claimed she had intended to die alongside her lover, but this was disproven when it was discovered she had secured herself with a seatbelt. McKenzie Sharilla was found guilty of all charges on August 21, 2023. However, due to her age at the time of the crime, just 5 days shy of her 18th birthday, the court took this into consideration and tried her as a minor. Under state law, McKenzie was eligible for consecutive 15-year prison sentences without parole for each murder she committed. However, due to her young age, the court decided to let her serve these sentences simultaneously. This meant she would be eligible for parole in 15 years. By that time, McKenzie would be 33 years old. Both the prosecution and defense expressed displeasure with the court's decision. Dominic family members felt the sentence was too lenient, and they intended to appeal for a stricter punishment. On the other hand, McKenzie's parents and lawyer believed the sentence was too harsh and decided to appeal as well. The judge refused to change the sentence, questioning whether McKenzie would be released after 15 years in prison. In his opinion, McKenzie showed no remorse for her actions and displayed arrogance towards the court. The extended prison term would provide her with ample time to reflect on the gravity of her crimes. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Natalie Connelly. Natalie Connelly is a beautiful and charming woman who has a stunning appearance identical to her twin sister. Her sister is equally beautiful, and they share a close bond not only because of their similar appearance but also because of their deep connection. Natalie has a special ability to bring joy to those around her. She can easily make people laugh and chat with anyone she meets. Despite facing the challenges of being a single mother, Natalie always strives to ensure that her daughter, Madison, does not lack anything. Her care and love for Madison are evident in her constant presence and attention. In a crowded bar, Natalie meets John, a charming and elegant man. They are attracted to each other from the beginning, and their relationship gradually blossoms. John's charm and wit quickly capture Natalie's heart. They exchange contact information and begin to delve deeper into their relationship. As Natalie spends more time with John, she feels an irresistible attraction to him. This was evident from the moment they first met, even though she had no idea of his profession or wealth at the time. As they grow closer, John reveals that he is a millionaire. His wealth is displayed through lavish gifts and fancy dinners at top restaurants. Natalie is fascinated by John's gentlemanly and elegant style, as well as his lavish mansion. However, behind John's charming exterior, there is much more mystery. His life is far more complicated than he lets on. While engaged to a pregnant partner and expecting a second child, John hides the existence of 3 other children. His relationship with Natalie is actually an affair, which continues even as John deals with the breakup of his previous relationship. Eventually, John chooses to turn his attention to Natalie. Their romance seems like a fairy tale from the start. John and Madison become close quickly, and Natalie soon wins the hearts of John's children. John treats Natalie to lavish and romantic experiences, from spa trips to hiring a chauffeur. It seems like he is making all her dreams come true. However, when Natalie moves in with John in Kinver, Stafford, England, the truth slowly emerges. Their relationship, initially fueled by passion, reveals its true nature once they live under the same roof. As they spend every waking moment together, they begin to understand each other better. However, John's interests start to annoy her. He enjoys intimate interactions and often leaves bruises and scratches. Romantic gestures and lavish dinners lose their appeal as Natalie realizes that she has to pay a high price for all of them. Natalie once thought her relationship with John was a fairy tale, but now she realizes the harsh truth behind it. Fearing abandonment, she still accepts John's demands during their intense sexual encounters. She recalls how John abandoned his pregnant ex-fiancée and fears the same thing will happen to her. Despite this, Natalie still feels fulfilled in the relationship and does not want to leave because she fears returning to her old monotonous life. She seeks comfort and guidance from her sister and mother, sharing the bruises and scratches John leaves during their intense sexual encounters. She admits that John enjoys causing her pain. Natalie faces a difficult situation as her relationship with John brings her happiness but also has negative aspects. She is caught in a dilemma of wanting to maintain her luxurious lifestyle with John while being dissatisfied with the intimate aspect of the relationship. The tension between them increases as they both seek out other relationships. As John continues to chat with other women, Natalie also begins texting other men without John's knowledge. When John discovers these exchanges, he becomes very angry. Although John makes no secret of his interactions with other women, he strongly objects to Natalie interacting with other men, highlighting the unfairness of their relationship. Despite John's attempts to hide his insecurities, he invites Natalie out for a casual evening on December 18, 2016, which includes drinks, football, and dinner. John forces Natalie to drink heavily and even offers her cocaine, albeit in smaller amounts than he consumes. This was not the first time he had created such a situation, suggesting a pattern of behavior intended to make Natalie more comfortable before committing bad acts on her when they were home alone. This raises the question of whether Natalie's heavy drinking on these occasions was an attempt to dull the pain she knew she would endure behind closed doors with him. John wanted to be in complete control of the situation, ensuring he could carry out his intentions towards Natalie without being hindered. Therefore, he carefully controlled his alcohol intake, aiming to achieve a mild state of intoxication that did not affect his performance during their sexual encounters. After what seemed like a pleasant day out, ending with a satisfying meal at one of their favorite places, John arranged for a driver to take them home. However, beneath the normal appearance, John's evil intentions were hidden. That day, Natalie was in a drunken state, which only worsened as dinner failed to sober her up or absorb the alcohol. She was disoriented, stumbling out of the car as they arrived home, accidentally leaving her phone behind. Instead of letting Natalie recover from her drunkenness, John had other intentions. He returned to retrieve Natalie's phone, but it is unclear whether he had seen her messages. Natalie became the victim of John's cruel actions as he attempted to inflict maximum harm on her. He attacked her in various ways, including punching, kicking, stomping, and the disgusting act of throwing bleach at her face and genitals. To add to her pain, John used a bottle of carpet cleaner, using its nozzle as a weapon. After the attack, he left Natalie naked and bloody at the bottom of the stairs, her dress pulled up around her waist, leaving her to suffer from her injuries. Natalie lay motionless in a pool of blood when John left the bed. A few hours later, when he awoke, he discovered that Natalie had died from the severe injuries she had sustained, totaling 40. John's subsequent actions, including his nonchalant call to emergency services, revealed his twisted mentality. He showed no emotion or remorse when he informed the paramedics of his futile attempts at CPR and referred to Natalie's unresponsive state with indifference. As the paramedics loaded Natalie's body into the ambulance, John remained silent and emotionless, observing the tragic consequences of his actions. After Natalie was pronounced dead, John was arrested. To justify his cruel actions, John made the excuse that the rough sex had gone too far and claimed his innocence. He alleged that Natalie had consented to the rough actions, claiming that she had initiated them and that she had been the one who desired all these brutal actions. According to John, Natalie allegedly requested rough sex, including being injured, beaten, and even having a bottle of carpet cleaner inserted into her. John claimed that, despite bleeding and in pain, Natalie allegedly reassured him that she was safe and wanted to continue. However, John's account is not credible. He attempted to deflect blame by saying that Natalie had agreed to engage in rough sex and that they had engaged in similar acts many times without issue. When asked about leaving Natalie partially clothed at the bottom of the stairs, John offered a weak excuse, claiming it was a regular occurrence and that he had never provided a blanket because the house was always warm. Throughout the proceedings, John showed no remorse or regret for his actions. Instead, he placed the blame squarely on Natalie. His attempts to shift the blame left onlookers frustrated. Despite being convicted of manslaughter, John received a lenient sentence of 3 years and 8 months, but only served 22 months before being released. Natalie Connelly's case sparked widespread criticism and controversy, leading Fiona McKenzie to launch the "We Can't Agree with This" movement in December 2018. The movement aims to promote discussion about sexual assault and calls for the removal of the rough sex defense. In Fiona's view, the defense minimizes and legitimizes violence in intimate relationships, perpetuates harmful stereotypes, and devalues the experiences of survivors. However, in interviews, Fiona has been surprised that some people, despite disagreeing with the court's decision, have accepted it. The reason for this acceptance is that they believe the incident was isolated, not a systemic problem. However, this way of thinking often leads to victim blaming, with survivors being held responsible for the risks that may have resulted from their behavior. Such attitudes highlight the need for continued advocacy and education to challenge harmful beliefs and support survivors of sexual violence. The Domestic Violence Bill was passed by Parliament on July 6, 2020, and following royal assent on April 29, 2021, it became law and is known as the Domestic Violence Act 2021. This marks a significant step forward in combating domestic violence and preventing perpetrators from using harmful excuses to justify their actions. Natalie's loss has left a deep void in the lives of her family and friends. They are still grappling with the pain of her loss. However, their unwavering love and support for Natalie is a testament to her strong and resilient spirit. The community has come together to raise awareness of domestic violence and support survivors on their journeys to healing and recovery. Their solidarity and compassion are an inspiration and hope to those struggling. Although Natalie Connelly's life was tragically cut short, her memory will live on in the hearts of those who knew and loved her. Her story will hopefully inspire us to come together to fight domestic violence and support those in need. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Wilma Anderson. Wilma Anderson is the daughter of Linda and Marcus Anderson. Her parents' divorce later left difficulties in the family, making Wilma's living situation unstable. Although she could not live with both parents, her mother was always interested in her life. Wilma lived with her older sister Emily. Wilma is an active and ambitious girl. She likes to share her life on social networks, often posting photos on Facebook. Wilma loves being in front of the camera, showing her creativity and cheerful personality. Wilma met Tishko Ahmed Shabazz in Sweden when she was 15 years old. At that time, Tishko was 20 years old. Because the age of sexual consent in Sweden is 15, their relationship did not cause any legal problems. Although initially apprehensive about the 5-year age gap, Wilma's mother trusted her daughter's decision and eventually accepted Tishko. Tishko was originally from Iraq but moved to Sweden with his family when he was 8 years old. Tishko lived with his father and stepmother. During his school years, Tishko faced bullying, but as he grew older, he developed a strong determination to overcome any challenges he faced. In 2014, Tishko became a Swedish citizen, and after completing his studies in 2018, Tishko found a job in the care industry. Wilma and Tishko moved in together in Uddevalla, Sweden. Over time, Tishko became increasingly controlling, and Wilma's mother noticed a change in her daughter's behavior during the 2 years Wilma lived with Tishko. Wilma often confided in her sister Emily about her difficult relationship with Tishko. On November 14, 2019, Wilma told Emily over the phone that she was ending her relationship with Tishko. She was exhausted by Tishko's control over every aspect of her life, including what she wore, where she went, who she talked to, and how she applied her makeup. Feeling suffocated and desperate to end the relationship, she said she had to pack up and leave before Tishko got home from work. Emily tried to contact Wilma, but her calls went unanswered. The next day, November 15th, Wilma missed her dentist appointment. 2 days later, November 17th, Wilma's parents came to the apartment she shared with Tishko. After several knocks, Tishko opened the door, apparently intoxicated. Wilma's mother, Linda, asked Tishko about Wilma's whereabouts. He admitted that their relationship was over and that Wilma had left after taking her things. Tishko claimed that he did not know where Wilma was. Wilma's parents entered the apartment, hoping to find out more. Tishko recounted the argument that led to the breakup, with him and Wilma having a heated argument when he returned home from work around 5:30 p.m. Initially, her parents were not too concerned, as Tishko and Wilma's relationship was unstable. Emily, extremely concerned about Wilma's disappearance, created a Facebook post seeking information about Wilma. Normally, Wilma always contacted her family, so the lack of contact was very unusual. In the post, Emily described Wilma's appearance as 165 centimeters tall with black hair. After the posts were posted on social media, the police got involved. They interviewed Emily and other family members and began searching for anyone who may have come into contact with Wilma. However, neither Linda nor Emily had heard from her since her disappearance. With an extensive search effort underway, a combined task force of police, friends, and family set out to track Wilma using dogs and drone technology. When police approached Tishko for questioning, he claimed to have no knowledge of Wilma's disappearance or whereabouts, confirming that he had had no recent contact with her. By November 17th, 3 days into the search for Wilma, there were still no leads. Wilma was normally active on social media, but she had been strangely quiet during the time she was missing. As a result, some 5,000 people joined the search effort, and police returned to Tishko to gather more information. However, Tishko insisted that he knew nothing about Wilma's disappearance. Tishko claimed that Wilma had moved on to another man after they broke up, but there was no evidence to support this claim. Wilma's friends and family were left deeply concerned about her disappearance. Meanwhile, Wilma's family shared disturbing details with police about how Wilma's life had changed for the worse since living with Tishko. According to Wilma's family, Tishko controlled Wilma's life. Her sister, Emily, revealed that Wilma confessed that she was abused while living with Tishko. But despite this abuse, Wilma still had strong feelings for Tishko. Tishko took extreme measures to monitor Wilma's activities, including installing a GPS device on her phone. This allowed him to constantly track her location. A series of text messages between the two revealed Tishko's controlling behavior. The police thoroughly investigated Tishko's alibi. He claimed that after arriving home from work at 5 p.m., he did not leave his apartment. To verify Tishko's story, police tracked the GPS on Tishko's phone. Police found CCTV footage showing Tishko at a supermarket around 2:30 p.m. on the day Wilma went missing. He then returned home from work at 5 p.m. Neighbors reported a loud argument between Tishko and Wilma, and arguments were common between them. A loud argument between the Wilma and Tishko occurred around 6 p.m. This prompted a concerned neighbor to check on them. As the neighbor approached the apartment door, they noticed an eerie silence. The sudden quiet was unsettling, but the neighbor, unsure of what to do next, returned to their own apartment. The police thoroughly investigated Tishko's activities, including his workplace and company vehicle. They requested forensic testing on the vehicle and reviewed the GPS data, which revealed his movements from Thursday the 14th to Monday the 18th. According to the GPS log, Tishko had visited clients and returned to his residence during his regular work hours on those days. On the evening of the argument, around 6:30 p.m., Tishko left his apartment. Witnesses saw him walking alone along the freeway, wearing all black clothing. A motorcyclist described Tishko as appearing lost in thought. Police stopped Tishko and escorted him home. When questioned, Tishko said he initially intended to catch a train but decided to walk home instead. However, the police did not file an official report on the incident. Later, on November 19, 2019, Tishko was arrested. He had obvious scratches on his wrists. A search of Tishko's apartment revealed clues such as Wilma's belongings, including a handbag, jacket, shoes, and eyeglasses. Wilma's mother, Linda, insisted that her daughter would always carry her bag, adding to the mystery. Forensic experts tested the scene with Blue Star, a sophisticated version of luminol, and found a trail of blood. Every room had blood on the walls and floors, suggesting a violent struggle had taken place throughout the apartment. The bed had a gruesome stain, a torso-shaped mark that was visible under the glow of Blue Star. The discovery of muscle tissue on a knife and on the living room wall added to the horrific scene. The large amount of blood found made it seem unlikely that anyone could have survived. The search continued outside the apartment, where trash bags were found containing Tishko's bedding with incriminating blood stains. Confronted at the police station, Tishko was shown the evidence against him. However, he strongly denied any involvement, claiming he would have known if someone had been seriously hurt in his home. At the same time, more and more people were joining the search for Wilma every day. The apartment where Wilma was last seen has now been turned into a crime scene, but all attempts to contact Wilma have been unsuccessful. 2 weeks after Wilma went missing, on November 28, police brought in sniffer dogs to assist in the search. These trained dogs are experts at detecting the scent of dead bodies. When they entered the bedroom, one of the dogs quickly indicated that it had found something, a sign that there was likely a dead person or human remains in the area. A strong, unpleasant stench filled the apartment, making the already gloomy atmosphere even more oppressive. The police had searched the place before, but this time they carefully searched the bedroom, paying special attention to the area the dogs had marked. They focused on a wardrobe, which at first glance looked like another piece of furniture. However, inside this ordinary-looking wardrobe was a small travel suitcase. When they opened the suitcase, the police found a large object wrapped in aluminum kitchen foil. When they carefully removed the foil, they witnessed a horrifying sight with blood stains on the foil. Wilma's head had been severed, wrapped, and secured with tape. The travel case, which held the gruesome evidence of Wilma's fate, was sent to the forensic labs in Gothenburg for further analysis. A detailed examination uncovered Tishko's fingerprints. The investigation revealed the shocking conclusion of the case. Although the exact cause of Wilma's death could not be confirmed, investigators found severe injuries to her head and eyes consistent with blunt force trauma. The violent nature of the decapitation made it difficult to assess the full extent of Wilma's head injuries. Wilma's family was devastated by the news of Wilma's tragic fate. Wilma's mother Linda joined the efforts to find the rest of Wilma's body. The family was forced to confront the horrific details of the crime, which were slowly emerging from the evidence found in Tishko's apartment. A harrowing picture began to emerge. Wilma's final moments may have taken place in the living room, where she was brutally attacked, suffering a fatal blow to the head. Swedish police recorded Tishko's denial of involvement in Wilma's murder, in which he maintained his innocence. His statement revealed a distorted perception of love, as he said, "You forget that this is a girl he loved and that he lived his whole life for. If he killed her, he wouldn't be able to keep her head. Despite this, law enforcement gathered enough evidence to charge Tishko, and his trial was scheduled for May 2020. Throughout the trial, Wilma's body remained missing. Tishko showed no signs of remorse or emotion. In court, his defense team tried to argue that he was not guilty by reason of insanity, pointing to his irrational beliefs and claims about Wilma as evidence. However, this defense was unsuccessful. On July 27, 2020, the court delivered its verdict. Tishko, 23, was found guilty of murdering 17-year-old Wilma Anderson and was initially sentenced to life in prison. However, the appeals court later reduced his sentence to 18 years. The sentence was reduced in part due to a lack of concrete evidence surrounding the circumstances of Wilma's death, including the fact that her body was never found. Wilma's funeral was finally held in late 2020, bringing closure to the tragic events, but undoubtedly causing immense grief for her family. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lauren Burke. Lauren Ashley Burke was born on December 30th, 1989 in Marietta, Georgia, to James Burke and Vivian Gershon, who later divorced. She had two siblings, Jacqueline and Chad Burke. After high school, Lauren attended Auburn University, where she studied graphic design and was an active member of the Delta Gamma sorority. She also played lacrosse and was involved in various campus activities. Her friends described her as a friendly, excellent student who was always smiling, happy, and helpful. Lauren started dating Sean McQuaid while still in high school, and they continued their relationship when they both enrolled at Auburn University. At that time, education was their top priority, but they still made plans for their future together. Tragically, on March 4, 2008, she began the day by having breakfast with Sean at a cafe at 11 a.m. She then attended class and called her father, James, to discuss plans for spring break and a dentist appointment. After finishing her conversation with her father, Lauren visited her friend Sean in his dorm room, where she stayed until the evening. At 8:30 p.m., she had a planned study session with her classmate Michael at the library. When Lauren left Sean's room around 8 p.m., it was already dark outside. She got into her car, a black 2001 Honda Civic, which was parked in the lot next to the dorm. This was the last time Sean saw her. Michael waited for Lauren at the library, but she didn't show up. He started calling her cell phone, but she didn't answer. He kept calling and eventually got through to her. Lauren told him she had forgotten about their appointment and hung up. About an hour later, at 9 p.m., a 911 call was made, reporting an injured girl lying on the roadside near the Farmville Baptist Church and Route 280 on the 147 freeway. Lauren was lying in the middle of the road, taking slow, deep breaths because she was suffocating. She had many injuries on her body and was only wearing socks on her feet. The traffic in both directions was blocked because drivers had stopped their cars in the roadway to help her. At 9:12 p.m., the police arrived, but Lauren was already unconscious. A few minutes later, paramedics came and found that Lauren's pulse was very weak as they loaded her into the ambulance. She was taken to East Alabama Medical Center at 9:35 p.m., where doctors started trying to save her life. Around the same time, at 9:27 p.m., multiple people called 911 to report a car on fire on the Auburn University campus. Firefighters and police were sent to the scene, but they couldn't find the owner of the burning car among the students who had come out of their dorms to see the fire. When the police checked the license plate, they found out that the car belonged to James Burke, a resident of Georgia. But what they didn't know was that James Burke is Lauren's father. The police called James and learned that the burned-out Honda actually belonged to his daughter Lauren, who is a student at Auburn University. James was frantic to know what was happening with his daughter, but the police couldn't give him any information. They didn't know where Lauren was and claimed no one was in the burned-out car. James tried calling Lauren's cell phone, but she didn't answer, which only made him more anxious. Desperate for news, James reached out to his daughter's friends, but none of them knew anything about her whereabouts or the car fire. He then contacted his ex-wife, Vivian, Lauren's mother, hoping she might know something, but she was also in the dark. Vivian called Lauren's boyfriend, Sean, at 9:40 p.m. to inform him that Lauren was missing and her car had been burned. Sean started making calls to their mutual friends to see if anyone had seen Lauren that evening. He discovered that she had canceled a library meeting, claiming she had forgotten about it. Sean was certain that Lauren hadn't forgotten her evening appointment because she had told him she was heading to the library when she left his room 2 hours earlier. Meanwhile, Lauren's family and friends were searching for her, unaware of the desperate situation unfolding at East Alabama Medical Center, where doctors were fighting to save her life. Lauren was brought to the hospital unconscious and without identification, so the doctors didn't know who she was. Despite their best efforts, they were unable to save her, and she was pronounced dead about an hour after admission. The autopsy revealed that she had died from a single bullet wound that had punctured both lungs. The shot had been fired from very close range, with the gun muzzle just inches from her skin. As police investigated the burned-out car on campus, whose owner was missing, they quickly pieced together the evidence and realized that the hospital's unidentified victim was Lauren Burke. On March 5, 2008, James Burke identified his daughter Lauren's body after traveling from Atlanta. The news of her death quickly spread throughout the Auburn University campus. As Lauren's loved ones mourned her loss, the police worked to uncover the circumstances surrounding her death, including the connection between her murder and the car fire. They also sought to determine whether other students were at risk. Investigators processed both the scene where Lauren's body was found and the area around her car for evidence. Auburn Police Captain Tom Stauffer stated that the department has dedicated all available resources to finding the person responsible for the crime, as the tight-knit student community of Auburn, Alabama, takes such incidents very seriously. The police are deeply invested in solving the case and will not rest until the perpetrator is caught. To aid in the investigation, Alabama Governor Bob Riley has offered a $10,000 reward for any information leading to an arrest. The burned-out car belonging to Lauren Burke was brought to the Auburn Police Department, where state forensic laboratory investigators and state fire chief's office officers examined the charred remains. Their search uncovered burned clothing fragments, a melted digital camera, and the car's owner's manual. A significant discovery was a .38 caliber bullet found under the front seat, suggesting that the car's interior may have been the crime scene and that the perpetrator had set the fire to destroy evidence. Investigations involved interviews with Lauren's family, friends, and boyfriend, but none could identify a suspect who had a motive to harm her. Prior to her death, Lauren had been at a Sean's dorm, so detectives searched his room but found nothing linking him to the crime. After talking to Michael, the person Lauren was supposed to meet at the library, detectives discovered that when Lauren answered his call, he heard a sound similar to a moving car in the background. This new information led them to investigate further, and they found that Lauren's bank card had been used multiple times shortly after she was found lying in the road. It seemed likely that the person using Lauren's bank card was involved in her incident, so the police started searching for them. However, the case took an unexpected turn soon after. Just 2 days after Lauren's death, on March 7, 2008, at 9:55 a.m., a similar attack occurred at a Walmart parking lot in Newnan, Georgia, about 75 miles from Auburn. A 72-year-old woman was assaulted by a man of African descent as she was getting into her car. The attacker hit her on the head, threatened her, and forced her to move to the passenger seat. He then got into the driver's seat and tried to drive away, but realized an eyewitness was following him and calling for help. The perpetrator, fearing the police would be called, returned to the Walmart parking lot where they had initially been spotted. They abandoned the stolen vehicle, got into a nearby silver Chrysler Sebring and sped away. Several hours later, 4 officers began a high-speed chase to catch the fleeing Chrysler as it headed towards Columbus, West Georgia. The driver of the Chrysler refused to stop, putting other drivers at risk during the pursuit. Officers observed the driver throwing an object out of the window, which was later found to be a .38 caliber revolver. The chase continued until the Chrysler broke down, billowing smoke from under the hood. The driver stopped abruptly in the middle of the road and opened the door. A pursuing police officer on a motorcycle crashed into the open door, causing the officer to fly over the handlebars and fall to the ground. Fortunately, the officer was not seriously injured. The perpetrator then attempted to flee into the nearby woods, but was quickly caught by the police and taken into custody. Courtney Lockhart was born on October 20th, 1984. According to his family, he was a pleasant and fun-loving person before enlisting in the U.S. Army. However, after serving in Iraq from 2004 to 2005, he returned as a changed person. His mother described Courtney as a cheerful individual, but after his return from Iraq, his behavior drastically changed. He stopped smiling, became paranoid about people standing behind him, and would often hide in closets or under the bed. In 2006, Lockhart's personal life took a toll when he had a daughter with his ex-girlfriend. The same year, he was court-martialed for assaulting fellow soldiers, using illegal substances, and abandoning his unit without permission. As a result, he spent 7 months in detention before being dishonorably discharged from the Army in December 2006. In the following years, Lockhart's life spiraled out of control. By 2008, he had become increasingly troubled, neglecting his personal hygiene, abandoning his responsibilities as a father, and developing a severe addiction to illegal substances. Between February 2008 and the time of his capture, Lockhart committed a series of burglaries using a consistent modus operandi. Courtney Lockhart targeted women, approaching them from behind in parking lots as they got into their cars. He would threaten them with a gun, demand their purses, and try to take their cars. Tragically, one of these crimes ended in the death of Lauren Burke. Lockhart's string of assaults came to an end on March 7, 2008, when he attacked a 72-year-old woman but failed to escape a police pursuit. After his arrest, Lockhart, then 23, confessed to the police that he was responsible for kidnapping and killing Lauren Burke. The police interrogation, which was recorded on video, became a crucial piece of evidence in the trial. Additionally, the police found Lauren's personal belongings, including her iPod and bank cards, in Lockhart's car. Lockhart provided a detailed account of the events leading up to Lauren's death. On Tuesday, March 4, 2008, he woke up in his silver Chrysler Sebring, which he had been sleeping in near the East Alabama Medical Center. Desperate for money, he drove around Auburn looking for another victim to target. It's notable that Lockhart exclusively targeted women, never men. He eventually ended up on the campus of Auburn University, where he parked near the student dorms and spent several hours watching students from his car. At 8 p.m., Lockhart saw a girl, who turned out to be Lauren, casually walk up to the car parked next to him and open the door. Without hesitation, Lockhart grabbed his revolver and approached Lauren from behind. He poked her with the gun muzzle and demanded to know how much money she had. When she didn't respond, he forced her into the front passenger seat and got behind the wheel himself. Lauren was initially silent, but then screamed in fear. Once she calmed down, she handed Lockhart $200 from her purse, begging him to leave. However, instead of leaving, Lockhart threatened her with a gun, ordering her to remove her clothes. Lauren complied, leaving on only a pair of socks. Lockhart's motivation for making her undress was his mistaken belief that she would be less likely to try to escape without clothes. Lockhart then drove around Auburn, holding Lauren at gunpoint with one hand while steering with the other. Lauren attempted to talk him out of his criminal actions, and when he claimed his life was over, she promised to help him find a job in an effort to de-escalate the situation. Meanwhile, her phone started ringing, and Lockhart instructed her to answer it and make up an excuse to avoid arousing suspicion. Lauren was supposed to meet Michael at the library, but when he called to confirm, she claimed to have forgotten and quickly hung up. Later, Lockhart drove her through the city streets as she persistently begged him to release her, offering to help him overcome his personal struggles. As they drove down Highway 147, Lauren made a desperate attempt to escape by opening the car door and trying to jump out while the vehicle was still moving. In the ensuing chaos, Lockhart admitted to accidentally firing a shot, which tragically pierced both of Lauren's lungs, and she also sustained injuries from the fall. Lauren regained enough strength to wave at passing drivers, but soon lost consciousness. Lockhart, who had abducted her, parked his car outside a church and watched as people began to stop and assist Lauren. Realizing the police would soon arrive, he hastily left the scene, planning to destroy evidence he had left in his car. Lockhart drove to a gas station, where he used Lauren's bank card to buy a can of gasoline. He then doused the interior of his car with the gasoline, got back in, and drove to the campus where he had initially taken Lauren. His Chrysler was parked there. As he drove, Lockhart became lightheaded from the gasoline fumes, so he rolled down the windows to let in some fresh air. Once he arrived on campus, Lockhart stole $46, an iPod, and Lauren's bank cards from her car. He then set the car on fire and drove away in his Chrysler. At a gas station, Lockhart filled up his tank using Lauren's money, then returned to campus. However, investigators began to question Lockhart's story, suspecting that he had ulterior motives for making Lauren undress. They thought that Lockhart's goal was not to prevent her from escaping, but rather to exploit her in some way. When Lauren jumped out of the moving car, Lockhart's true intentions were foiled. The investigators were skeptical about Lockhart's claim that he accidentally shot Lauren. Given his military background and experience with guns, it seemed unlikely that he would accidentally discharge his weapon. Instead, it appeared that Lauren realized she was in grave danger and decided to escape by jumping out of the car, at which point Lockhart intentionally shot her. Forensic tests confirmed that the bullet found in Lauren's car was fired from the same gun Lockhart had abandoned during a police chase. Expert analysis also ruled out the possibility of an accidental shot, as the trigger required significant force to fire. On March 9th, investigators questioned Lockhart for the second time. The next day, he was officially charged with multiple crimes related to Lauren Burke's case. The trial started on November 8th, 2010. Lockhart's lawyers argued that their client suffered from a mental illness due to his military service, and that Lauren's shooting was accidental. According to court records, Lockhart pleaded not guilty, citing mental defect or insanity as the reason. Lauren was initially silent, but then screamed in fear. Once she calmed down, she handed Lockhart $200 from her purse, begging him to leave. However, instead of leaving, Lockhart threatened her with a gun, ordering her to remove her clothes. Lauren complied, leaving on only a pair of socks. Lockhart's motivation for making her undress was his mistaken belief that she would be less likely to try to escape without clothes. Lockhart then drove around Auburn, holding Lauren at gunpoint with one hand while steering with the other. Lauren attempted to talk him out of his criminal actions, and when he claimed his life was over, she promised to help him find a job in an effort to de-escalate the situation. Meanwhile, her phone started ringing, and Lockhart instructed her to answer it and make up an excuse to avoid arousing suspicion. Lauren was supposed to meet Michael at the library, but when he called to confirm, she claimed to have forgotten and quickly hung up. Later, Lockhart drove her through the city streets as she persistently begged him to release her, offering to help him overcome his personal struggles. As they drove down Highway 147, Lauren made a desperate attempt to escape by opening the car door and trying to jump out while the vehicle was still moving. In the ensuing chaos, Lockhart admitted to accidentally firing a shot, which tragically pierced both of Lauren's lungs, and she also sustained injuries from the fall. Lauren regained enough strength to wave at passing drivers, but soon lost consciousness. Lockhart, who had abducted her, parked his car outside a church and watched as people began to stop and assist Lauren. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Karina Vetrano. On August 2nd, 2016, Karina planned to meet her father after work to spend some quality time together. Since Miss Vetrano had moved away, family gatherings had become infrequent due to everyone's busy schedules. Karina in particular had a lot on her plate, juggling 2 jobs. Philip picked up Karina from work and took her to his home, where they shared stories about their week. Before leaving, Karina invited her father to join her for a jog, as they often did, covering several miles together. However, Philip declined, citing severe back pain that couldn't be alleviated. He offered to call her a cab instead, but Karina preferred to jog, enjoying the pleasant weather and fresh air. Moreover, she was training for an upcoming marathon to take her mind off her recent breakup. A jog was just what she needed to clear her head. That evening, the Vetrano family said goodbye to their youngest daughter, Karina. As she left for a jog at 5:45 p.m., her usual route took her to Spring Creek Park, a peaceful oasis in the midst of the city. However, her father, Mr. Vetrano, warned her to stick to familiar paths and avoid talking to strangers, as parts of the park were overgrown with thickets and swamps. Ignoring her father's advice, Karina wandered into a secluded, grassy area in search of solitude. Tragically, her decision proved fatal. A sudden, sharp pain struck the back of her head, and she fell to the ground. As the hours ticked by, the Vetrano family grew increasingly anxious. It had been 2 hours since Karina left, and she should have been home by now, or at least answering her parents' frantic calls. But there was only silence, and a chilling uncertainty settled over the Vetrano household. Philip's anxiety grew as he sensed something was wrong, so he sought help from his neighbor, the chief of the New York City Police Department. The two were on good terms, and the chief knew Philip wouldn't worry unnecessarily. After reporting Karina missing, the police launched a search in the park area and surrounding streets, using experienced canine units. The first 24 hours are critical in missing person cases, so they utilized all available resources before nightfall. Meanwhile, Mr. Vetrano, accompanied by a group of volunteers, searched for his daughter on his own. He thoroughly combed the park, making phone calls along the way. As dusk fell, he spotted a light in the grass and upon closer inspection, found Karina's phone. Philip hoped that maybe she had simply lost her phone and hadn't notified them. Philip, her father, pushed through underbrush towards police officers but stumbled upon a lifeless young woman, partially undressed and face down. As he turned her over, his heart sank. It was his daughter Karina. A scream erupted from his lips as the truth hit him. His darkest fears realized. The news was too much for Mr. Vetrano to bear. The police, responding to his anguished screams and cries, rushed over to restrain him, carefully pulling him away from Karina's lifeless body. They explained that the area was now a crime scene, and every detail, no matter how small, was crucial evidence. To preserve the integrity of the investigation, the officers gently but firmly asked Philip not to touch or disturb anything in the surrounding area. On his way home, Mr. Vetrano was consumed by thoughts of how to break the devastating news to his wife about their daughter's passing. Memories of the past flooded his mind, including the day their second daughter was born on July 12, 1986, in Queens. He felt immense pride in her from a young age, recalling how obedient and well-mannered she was. He vividly recalled taking her to her first day of school and her academic achievements, which led to her earning a master's degree in speech pathology from St. John's University. Karina had always dreamed of helping children, particularly those with autism. She was a multi-talented individual who loved to travel, write, and engage in sports, especially running, which was a shared passion between them, bringing them closer together. As a father, he had been protective of her relationships, wanting her to be truly loved and hoping she would build a strong family like his own, eventually giving him loving grandchildren. As Mr. Vetrano returned home, the journey felt like an eternity. He paused at the entrance, taking a deep breath to calm himself. "I need to be strong for my family," he thought. "I have to pull myself together." His wife met him at the door and immediately understood the gravity of the situation from the look on his face. Kathy cried and embraced her husband, offering comfort. As the news spread, relatives and friends struggled to come to terms with what had happened. They were shocked and disbelieving, finding it hard to accept the brutal and sudden death of the her. The investigation revealed that Miss Vetrano had been the victim of a brutal attack. It was clear that she had fought back. Her clenched fists and the bruises and abrasions on her body were evidence of her resistance. Her athletic clothing was torn, and the autopsy showed that the back of her skull had been damaged by a blunt object, likely a stone. However, the cause of death was ultimately asphyxiation, with a clear mark visible on her neck. The forensic examination provided disturbing evidence that Karina Vetrano's death was a violent and intimate crime. The experts' findings supported the police's initial suspicions. Traces of earth and grass were found under the victim's fingernails, suggesting that she tried to free herself from her attacker's grip. Further examination revealed that her teeth were knocked out and cracked, indicating that she bit her attacker in self-defense. The multiple scratches on her neck indicated that she used her hands to try to pry the attacker's grip loose. Karina's determination to survive is evident in her fierce struggle. In life, Karina was a creative and thoughtful person who enjoyed writing. She had starred in a short film based on her poem Paradox in 2013 and often wrote about complex topics such as love and mortality in her blog posts. Tragically, shortly after her death, another jogger's body was found in a similar location in Princeton, Massachusetts. A woman walking alone in a secluded area suffered a similar attack. At first, it seemed like the same perpetrator as in previous cases, but geneticists compared DNA samples from the crime scenes and found no connection between the crimes. Surprisingly, the DNA samples didn't match, indicating they came from different individuals. Of particular interest was the DNA found under the victim's fingernails, on her back, and on Karina Vetrano's phone. Although the DNA was present in small amounts, experts were able to analyze it, and for a long time, it remained the only lead in the investigation, offering hope of identifying the attacker. Due to the fact that most murders are committed by someone the victim knows, the police had to consider every possibility. To aid in the investigation, the victim's father, who was the first to find his daughter's body, provided a DNA sample. Unfortunately, this procedure was conducted on the day of Karina's funeral, which was a poorly chosen time. Later, all of Karina's relatives also underwent DNA testing, but none of the results matched anything. Detectives questioned Karina's family and friends to see if anyone had a grudge against Mrs. Vetrano, but they found no one who might want to harm her. Everyone they spoke to respected and loved her. Next, they considered the possibility that the crime was committed for selfish reasons, such as meeting Karina in a secluded spot and attacking her. Unable to make progress, the investigators turned to the public for help, offering a $10,000 reward for information that could identify the perpetrator. The public responded, and detectives pursued over 250 leads, conducted 600 DNA tests, and compiled more than 1,700 reports. However, all their efforts were in vain, and it seemed that the perpetrator might not have a prior criminal record, which made the investigation even more challenging. Then on August 31st, 2016, a utility worker came forward with information, saying he had been in a restricted area of the park when Karina died, and had seen a man emerging from the bushes, who then ran north. The New York Police Department created and distributed a sketch of the suspect based on a witness's testimony. However, by December 2016, they began to consider the possibility that the person in the sketch might have been an innocent bystander who was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Unfortunately, the release of the sketch did not generate any new leads, and the investigation stalled once again. On December 4, 2016, the FBI joined the investigation into Karina Vetrano's death. They created a psychological profile of the perpetrator, suggesting that the individual was very familiar with the area, particularly the park where the incident occurred. This led them to believe that the attacker might have lived or still lives nearby. However, the FBI thought that the perpetrator was now avoiding the area, fearing capture. The police realized that the perpetrator had chosen the quiet, overgrown area of the park to commit the crime because it was easy to conceal his actions. Following this theory, the police screened local African-American men, but this did not produce the desired result. Chanel Lewis, a young African-American man who lived in a low-income housing complex in Brooklyn, about 4 or 5 miles from Spring Creek Park, did not stand out as a suspect at the time. Chanel lived with his mother, 3 sisters, and their children. He had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, but this didn't hold him back from graduating from a special school for students with emotional and behavioral issues. In school, Chanel was a quiet loner who was often bullied by his classmates. They would tease him about his clothes and appearance, and some girls even intimidated and punched him. Although he would sometimes try to fight back, he was no match for his tormentors. Instead, he would often smirk and walk away, earning him the nickname African Lizard. Despite this, a classmate named Danielle remembered Chanel as a smart kid with good grades who liked to share funny videos on the bus. She never saw him be mean to anyone. There were some reports that Chanel had once talked about wanting to bring a knife to school when he was in middle school. However, the head of his school later transferred, Dr. Edward Dana, said that they had no record of such threats. During Chanel's time at his school, he never got in trouble and never made any threats towards his fellow students. Chanel Lewis had a tough time as a teenager, often facing bullying and experiencing trauma. Despite this, he dreamed of working in social services to help people in need. When conflicts arose at home, he would take long walks, frequently visiting a local park. Lewis had a few minor run-ins with the police, including 2 incidents in Spring Creek and another for public urination in May 2016. In another incident, a store owner accused Lewis of loitering in his shop with a crowbar. When the police responded, they checked Lewis's ID and let him go, since he didn't have a prior record. Although this incident seemed minor at the time, it would later become crucial in the investigation into Karina Vetrano's death, which occurred in February 2017. Detective John Russo remembered a crucial detail from the investigation: a suspicious young man in a hoodie who would often lurk in the park, walking slowly and stopping in front of houses as if scouting for potential burglary targets. Although Russo lost sight of him, he didn't forget the encounter. The next day, a store owner reported an incident, and a teenager matching the description came to the police's attention. 2 months into the investigation, Russo revisited the memory of the suspicious individual, wondering if he might have witnessed something crucial, leading investigators to focus on Chanel Lewis. As they dug deeper into Lewis's background, his peculiar behavior, and a disturbing claim that he had expressed a desire to harm girls raised serious concerns and suspicions. With no other leads, the police decided to concentrate their efforts on Lewis. After Karina's death, it was discovered that Chanel Lewis had left his family's home after an argument and went to the park. When he returned, he was disheveled and had torn clothes, bruises, and abrasions. His mother asked what had happened, and Chanel claimed he was attacked. A witness's description of a man fleeing the park matched his account, which fit with the timeline of events. When investigators reviewed the medical records, they found Chanel's story plausible. However, they noticed similarities between Chanel's events and Karina Vetrano's case, raising suspicions. On February 4, 2017, Chanel voluntarily provided his DNA at the police station, which seemed unusual for someone who might be guilty. The interrogation of Lewis began the next day. He acknowledged being in the park on August 2, 2016, around 5 p.m., but specified that he was walking on dirt paths and listening to music. He admitted encountering Karina jogging with her phone. When detectives asked if something happened during their encounter, Lewis nodded and softly replied, yes. The response was cryptic, suggesting confusion. The investigators grew frustrated as Lewis struggled to provide a clear explanation. Finally, he stated, I was angry, and things escalated. What happened, happened. The detectives remained skeptical, concerned that this vague admission might create doubt among jurors in a potential trial. They pressed Lewis for more information, and he eventually confessed to the crime. Chanel recalled that during the attack, his punches knocked out several of Karina's teeth and injured his own hand. The struggle lasted around 5 minutes, during which time Karina fiercely resisted, scratching and biting to avoid drawing attention. Lewis dragged her off the path and into the tall grass, where he attempted to undress and assault her. Despite being shocked, Karina continued to resist. Eventually, Chanel strangled her until she was no longer alive. When questioned about his relationship with the victim, Chanel claimed he had not known Karina before the attack and that it was a chance encounter. The motive behind the attack was unexpected and bizarre. Chanel's hatred and uncontrollable aggression were triggered by a neighborhood gang member playing loud music for hours on end. These negative emotions were then unleashed on Karina. Although the reason behind the attack was strange, investigators' confusion was resolved when DNA comparison results matched perfectly. The microscopic traces found on the victim's body and phone belonged to Chanel, leading the police and prosecutor to conclude that the case was solved and ready for court. Chanel Lewis's motive for killing Karina Vetrano seemed unlikely. However, it's possible that he had seen her before at the park with her father and had become interested in her. When she rejected him, he might have become angry and attacked her, leading to a tragic series of events. At the trial, which began on November 5, 2018, Lewis pleaded not guilty despite his earlier confessions to the authorities. His family also denied his involvement in the crime. The prosecution charged Lewis with murder and sexual assault, which carried a sentence of 25 years to life imprisonment. The debate about Lewis's guilt went beyond the courtroom, with the media also discussing the case. Lewis's defense team argued that his arrest was unlawful and that there was racial bias and discrimination. However, the judge dismissed these allegations, stating that the investigation was conducted legally. The prosecution presented DNA evidence that linked Lewis to the crime scene. The defense argued that the evidence was contaminated due to the large number of people present at the scene, including the victim's father. Nevertheless, a forensic biologist stated that the odds of the DNA belonging to someone else were incredibly low, 1 in 6 trillion. The prosecution also presented Lewis's phone records, which showed that he had searched for terms related to forgiveness and second chances in Catholicism. This raised the question, what was Lewis trying to atone for? The release of Lewis's confession video sparked further controversy, with the defense arguing that the confession was coerced and that the police had fabricated evidence. The defense suggested that the initial investigation was botched and that Lewis was made a scapegoat due to public pressure for an arrest. The jury was impressed by the defense's arguments, but ultimately they were unable to reach a verdict, leading to a mistrial on November 21, 2018. A retrial was scheduled for March 2019, and after 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Lewis guilty of Karina Vetrano's murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole on July 23, 2019. Despite the defense's attempts to delay the trial, the jury found Lewis guilty. The case highlights the deep-seated prejudices and fears in society. Karina Vetrano's death serves as a grim reminder for women to be cautious. In the end, justice may have been served, but both families lost their children. The hope is that the truth was uncovered and that an innocent man is not behind bars while the real perpetrator remains free. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lindsay Cutshaw. Lindsay was born in 1982 in Ohio and grew up in a very religious family. She was an active and adventurous person, interested in sports, hiking, and extreme tourism. She attended Appalachian Bible College in West Virginia and dreamed of founding her own summer camp for children and teenagers. Jason, on the other hand, was born in 1978 in Michigan and also grew up in a deeply religious family. He was interested in hiking tours, mastering survival in the wild, and had leadership qualities. The couple met in 2002 during a hiking trip in Appalachia and immediately felt a mutual connection. They got engaged 6 months later and planned to get married in September 2004, with big plans for their future together. Lindsay and Jason, senior counselors at a Christian summer camp in California, had plans to start their own relationship. In the summer of 2004, they decided to take a weekend trip to the San Francisco area. They informed their colleagues in advance, leaving 2 experienced counselors in charge, and promised to return by Monday. They set off in Lindsay's 1992 red Ford Tempo, but that was the last time anyone saw them alive. By Sunday evening, they hadn't returned, but no alarm was raised, as everyone was confident they would arrive late that night or early Monday morning. However, when they still hadn't returned after the morning roll call at 8 a.m., their colleagues contacted the police and informed the missing couple's families. The police investigation faced a significant problem. No one knew precisely where they had gone. They had planned to explore around San Francisco, and their love for adventure and extreme leisure made it possible they could be in remote areas with no communication or civilization. While the police waited for the legally mandated 2 days, during which the missing were expected to report themselves, relatives and friends organized a search effort. They distributed flyers with photos of the couple and requested anyone who might have seen them to respond immediately. By Tuesday, law enforcement had joined the search operation, focusing on San Francisco, its suburbs, and surroundings. However, the area was vast, making it impossible to thoroughly search it. A friend's suggestion that the couple loved wild, rocky beaches prompted the police to focus on these areas. The search yielded no results for several days, and hope of finding the couple alive was rapidly diminishing. Then, on Wednesday, August 19th, a patrol helicopter flying over one of the rocky, wild beaches reported finding 2 bodies in sleeping bags. The police arrived at the scene to find the red Ford Tempo parked on a cliff near a lookout point and a steep trail leading directly to the beach. The car was identified as belonging to Lindsay Cutshaw. Descending the trail to the beach, officers found 2 individuals in bright sleeping bags. Initially, it seemed like they were just sleeping, but they didn't respond to calls or noise. Upon closer inspection, officers discovered that the sleeping bags contained a young man and woman, both showing no signs of life. A brief examination suggested that they had died from gunshot wounds to the head, and the distinctive smell of decomposition indicated they had been there for more than a day. All of the victims' belongings, including mobile phones, wallets containing bank cards and cash, were found beside them, ruling out robbery as a motive. The keys to their parked car above were also visibly placed, eliminating car theft as a motive. Investigators immediately suspected that the deceased were the same young couple who had gone missing last week near San Francisco. This was later confirmed by documents found nearby, identifying them as Lindsay Cutshaw and Jason Allen. The investigation revealed that the couple's bodies had no signs of physical or intimate assault, except for the gunshot wounds to the head. It appeared that Lindsay and Jason were sleeping peacefully at the time of the incident and didn't have a chance to react or defend themselves. The lack of signs of struggle or escape attempts suggested a swift and brutal act, resembling an execution or vendetta. The questions surrounding the case multiplied, but no answers were forthcoming. There were no signs of anyone else having stayed in the area, and the secluded beach was only accessible via a steep trail. Despite efforts, no shell casings were found nearby, leading investigators to theorize that the shooter either took them or threw them into the ocean. The shots had been fired at close range into the victims' heads, indicated by specific traces. An empty beer bottle from a rare brand, not commonly found in the area, was discovered a few meters from the sleeping bags. Since the victims didn't drink alcohol, it was possible that the bottle belonged to the shooter. This was considered a significant lead, although it was unclear whether it had any connection to the shooter or the crime. One theory proposed that the couple might have had a conflict with someone the day before the tragedy, and their opponent returned at night with a weapon to settle the score. Although Jason and Lindsay were very friendly with everyone, it was possible that they might have inadvertently displeased someone. The investigation considered the possibility that the shooter was intoxicated or mentally unstable. A crucial clue was found in the rare Marlin brand rifle, .45 caliber Model 18, produced in 1994, which was identified from the bullets extracted from the victims' skulls. Based on this, investigators speculated that the shooter was likely a male acting alone, possibly a hunter or firearm enthusiast. To piece together their final hours, investigators analyzed the photos they took and the guest book entries they wrote in the tourist cabin near the lookout point. They had stopped at a fishing pier about 20 miles away, which was confirmed by witness accounts and photographs. They had searched for a place to stay overnight, but found no vacancies in nearby hotels due to the peak tourist season. They then dined at a local restaurant, took a walk, and set off again in the evening. Witnesses reported that they were friendly and showed no signs of conflict. However, they had decided to camp on the prohibited beach, using their sleeping bags instead of a tent, believing they faced no threats on a warm August night. The investigation narrowed down the time frame of the crime to between 11 p.m. on Saturday and dawn on Sunday, when the couple likely went to sleep but did not survive until morning. Initially, suspicion fell on a local drifter who was seen nearby on the evening before the crime, but he was quickly cleared due to lack of evidence and DNA mismatch. The investigation into the double homicide stalled for nearly 2 years until the spring of 2006, when the police decided to release details of the weapon used in the crime and offered a $50,000 reward for any useful information. This led to around 1,000 calls, although most did not advance the investigation. However, the police became interested in 26-year-old Sean Gallen, who was pointed out by several locals. According to them, Gallen collected firearms and bladed weapons, behaved aggressively, and was frequently involved in conflicts, threatened acts of violence, and occasionally damaged other people's property. Gallen was arrested and questioned, but he had previously been on the police's radar for brawling, hooliganism, and driving under the influence of alcohol and drugs. He indeed had an impressive collection of weapons, but the specific rifle in question was not among them. Verifying his alibi from 2 years prior proved impossible, and his DNA did not match the sample found on the beer bottle at the crime scene, so Gallen had to be released. Simultaneously, another suspicious and aggressive drifter, 61-year-old Joseph Henry Burgess, came under scrutiny. He was often seen with a firearm, frightening local residents. It was discovered that in the late 1970s, Burgess lived in Canada, where he joined the Commune of the Children of God, positioning himself as a deeply religious person. However, he soon had a conflict with 2 young people that escalated into outright enmity, and a few weeks later, these individuals were found lifeless, each with several close-range gunshot wounds to the head. Notably, their bodies were also discovered on a beach in sleeping bags, seemingly taken while they slept. By the time the police arrived, Burgess had vanished, and his guilt was proven through numerous left-behind clues. However, he could not be convicted as he had fled to the USA, crossing the border illegally, and managed to evade capture for nearly a quarter of a century. Fast forward to 2017 in Forestville, California, a tragedy unfolded one night on March 14th, Gunshots rang out in the Gallen family home, prompting alarmed neighbors to immediately call the police. The victim was 35-year-old Seamus Gallen, and the perpetrator was his older brother, Sean. An argument had erupted between the siblings, during which Sean, under the influence of prohibited substances, grabbed a firearm and discharged 3 bullets into his younger brother. The police recognized the shooter's name, as Sean had previously been detained as a suspect in a double homicide on a beach, but was released due to a lack of evidence. Since then, he had been on the police's radar twice for property damage and making threats, but had only received fines. It was also discovered that the detainee was an avid hunter and had a hobby of crafting knives and other bladed weapons. Those around him described him as antisocial, aggressive, and unpredictable. After taking his brother's life, Sean attempted to flee but was almost immediately apprehended. Law enforcement reopened the case and took a closer look at a man who was a potential suspect 13 years earlier. On his social media, he had posted pictures of his large collection of weapons and claimed to have telepathic and extrasensory abilities. He believed he was on a special mission, receiving assignments from space, which suggested that he had a disturbed mind. The police suspected that he had serious mental health issues. He refused to cooperate with the investigation, spoke nonsensically, and maintained his innocence. However, when detectives checked the personal messages on his deceased brother's social media page, they found something interesting. Back in 2006, when a $50,000 reward was offered for information on the double homicide case, Sean's former girlfriend had sent a message to his brother, suggesting that she could claim the reward by turning in her ex-boyfriend. They both knew the truth, but kept silent. Unfortunately, it was no longer possible to question either of them, since the brother had been shot and the woman had died in a car accident 2 years earlier. When shown the printouts of the messages between his former girlfriend and his brother, Sean surprisingly confessed and began to give a detailed account of the crime. Despite it being over 13 years since the double homicide, Sean remembered the details of that night vividly. He claimed that he had left his house with a Marlin rifle, intending to hunt in a wooded area. He wandered aimlessly for a couple of hours before descending to a wild beach, which he claimed was a spot to encounter bears. As he walked along the shore, he spotted 2 bright sleeping bags and discovered a young man and woman sound asleep inside. He stood watching them for several minutes before suddenly hearing voices in his head commanding him to end their lives. Sean claimed this was the mission from space he could not ignore. He placed the barrel of his rifle almost against the young man's head and pulled the trigger. The sound woke the young woman, but before she could comprehend the situation, a second shot ended her life as well. Sean Gallen committed a brutal double homicide on a beach. After shooting the couple, he collected the shell casings and took them away in an empty beer can. He then gave the rifle to his father, asking him to hide it. The father buried the rifle in the cellar of his old barn without asking any questions. Years later, when Sean was arrested, he blamed the voices in his head for ordering him to commit violent acts. His defense team claimed he was mentally ill and unfit to stand trial. However, a forensic psychiatric evaluation revealed that although Sean suffered from mental disorders exacerbated by substance abuse, he had deliberately planned and executed the crime. The evaluation showed that Sean was fully aware of his actions and had taken steps to cover his tracks and avoid police detection. This included killing the young man first, knowing the woman would be unable to resist, and taking the casings with him to hide evidence. What was surprising was that Sean's family members and former girlfriend had suspected or known about his involvement in the crime, but none of them had reported him to the police. Sean was eventually tried and sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without parole, plus an additional 94 years for killing his own brother in 2017. He is currently serving his sentence in a special prison unit for dangerous inmates with mental disorders, where he is kept under close surveillance due to his aggressive behavior and claims of hearing voices. The motive behind the double homicide was never established, with Sean simply deciding to end the couple's lives because he saw them sleeping on the beach. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sabrina Quider. Sabrina Quider was born on December 5, 1982, in a London suburb to parents of French and Algerian descent, giving her a unique cultural heritage. This blend of influences likely contributed to her striking features and fiery personality. As the eldest of 4 children, Sabrina was cherished by her family and often held up as a model for her siblings. At the age of 2, her family moved to Paris, France, where she spent most of her childhood and adolescence. However, during her school years, Sabrina's complex and difficult personality began to emerge. Former classmates have described her as arrogant, domineering, self-absorbed, and extremely selfish. She had few friends, either at school or in her neighborhood, as she believed she was superior to those around her. Sabrina was particularly hostile towards bright and outgoing girls, viewing them as rivals and enemies. Despite her stunning physical appearance, she was a striking brunette with brown eyes and an impressive figure. Sabrina's inability to form genuine connections with others held her back from pursuing a career in modeling, where her looks could have taken her far. Instead, she often sought to manipulate those around her. As a child, Sabrina showed promise in sports and had some interest in music, but her lack of persistence and inconsistent effort hindered her from achieving success in either area. Later, Sabrina alleged that she was mistreated by her maternal relatives in France during her childhood, but these claims were never confirmed. In contrast, her family maintained that they spoiled her and that she always sought attention. During her teenage years, Sabrina's athletic ambitions were prematurely halted by a back injury, which in turn led to her dependence on prescription painkillers. In an attempt to obtain these drugs illegally, she was arrested and received a warning from the police. Sabrina was extremely self-absorbed, constantly craving attention and admiration for her appearance. She firmly believed that her future would be filled with luxury, glamour, and interactions with celebrities, and was even convinced she was born to be a star. At times, her fantasies became so vivid that they distorted her perception of reality, making her believe she belonged in the Hollywood elite. Sabrina holds a degree in English and French literature from the Sorbonne, but since 2006, she has falsely claimed to work in various roles in the fashion industry, such as stylist, makeup artist, fashion designer, or designer, despite lacking actual expertise. Sabrina, known for her stunning looks, has a history of captivating men and exploiting their affection. However, she never considered any of her suitors worthy of a serious relationship, waiting instead for a submissive partner who would obey her every command. After completing her education, Sabrina remained unclear about her life goals, feeling entitled to everything without putting in effort. Nevertheless, she enrolled at the prestigious Sorbonne University and simultaneously worked at a sweet shop to support herself financially. It was there, at the age of 18, that she met Wissam Medouni. Medouni, 6 years her senior, was a manager at a major French company's head office and a graduate of one of Paris's most prestigious universities. He aspired to earn a master's degree to advance his career, despite not being particularly handsome or part of elite social circles. He fell deeply in love with Sabrina and was willing to fulfill all her desires. Sabrina, in turn, found Medouni appealing, seeing him as someone she could manipulate and as a ticket to a wealthy lifestyle. She was drawn to his ambition and capacity for career success, as well as his willingness to pamper and spoil her. The couple began dating in 2000 and moved in together within a few months. Sabrina's true nature was soon exposed as she attempted to control Medouni in every way possible. When her demands were not met, she would throw tantrums, manipulate others, and even resort to physical violence. Moreover, she began to openly cheat on Medouni, not even trying to hide her infidelity or justify her actions. She would engage in flings with anyone, from casual acquaintances to Meduni's closest friends or colleagues. Despite Meduni's numerous attempts to end the relationship and leave her, he always found himself returning to her, unable to break free from his deep love for Sabrina. In 2001, Meduni achieved his master's degree and a significant promotion, resulting in a substantial increase in income. He spent lavishly on Sabrina's luxurious clothing and entertainment. As his family owned several properties in Paris, he managed them and handed over all the rental income to Sabrina. Meduni, who shared Franco-Algerian roots with Sabrina, saw her as a kindred spirit. According to reports, in the fall of 2001, they had a Muslim ceremony, which was documented by a certificate from the Argento Mosque. However, this religious ceremony was not enough to make their union official and legal. The couple had a son, whose paternity Meduni officially recognized. Years later, however, a Frenchman named Anthony Francois claimed to be the child's biological father. Francois, who would later testify in Sabrina's trial, described her as volatile, unpredictable, promiscuous, and manipulative. In 2008, the global financial crisis led to Wissem Meduni losing his high-paying job when the company he worked for went bankrupt. Around the same time, Sabrina Quider became fixated on moving to London, and she made the decision to relocate without fully consulting Meduni. With little choice, Meduni followed her to London, where he found work at a major English bank. However, Sabrina struggled to establish herself in the fashion industry due to her lack of skills, experience, and formal education. Over time, she had to lower her expectations and took on various jobs, including working as a nanny, in a call center, at a cafe, and even attempting network marketing. Sabrina's pursuit of love and success took an unexpected turn when she revived her teenage passion for music and added musician and composer to her credentials. Despite her enthusiasm, Sabrina faced challenges finding professional opportunities in the music industry. She attended numerous auditions and social events, hoping to make valuable connections. Sabrina met Mark Walton, a famous musician and songwriter, at an event. Mark was one of the founding members of Boyzone, a well-known Irish boy band. After leaving the group, he became a successful producer and music mogul, working with artists like Jennifer Lopez, Jessica Simpson, and Lady Gaga. By 2016, his net worth had exceeded $1 billion. To Sabrina, Mark was the perfect person to meet, her key to a world of fame and luxury. She impressed Mark with her beauty and charisma, and he fell in love with her at first sight. As their relationship progressed quickly, Sabrina made an effort to be pleasant and endearing, eventually ending her relationship with Meduni as she saw a promising future with Mark. Mark's previous relationship and child didn't deter Sabrina, and soon the couple moved in together, living in a luxurious house in an upscale London area. Mark covered all the expenses, including the rent for the lavish house Sabrina had chosen. For several months, Sabrina lived the luxurious life she had always dreamed of, socializing with celebrities, attending elite events, wearing designer clothing, and even appearing in glossy magazines. Sabrina found it difficult to manage Mark because she was afraid of losing him. Her inability to control her nature eventually led to jealousy towards every woman around Mark. Over time, Sabrina's demands grew, and she began to crave more gifts and luxury. Mark tried to please her by showering her with designer clothes, jewelry, and taking her to upscale restaurants and clubs, but no matter what he did, it was never enough to satisfy her. Sabrina's home had a revolving door of staff and nannies due to her growing paranoia. She suspected them of theft or trying to seduce Mark, which led to a high turnover rate. Her irrational behavior pushed Mark to the edge, and in 2011, he ended their relationship and moved to California, leaving Sabrina with nothing. When Mark left, Sabrina lost the luxurious lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. In an attempt to win him back, she started giving interviews accusing Mark of being violent and abusive. She would call him, crying and begging him to return, even threatening to take her own life, but none of these tactics worked. Realizing she had lost Mark, Sabrina reached out to her ex-partner, Wissem Meduni, whose career was thriving as a bank executive. He forgave her and took her back, still harboring feelings for her. They resumed living together, and soon after reuniting, Sabrina discovered she was pregnant. Sabrina informed Walton, who, through his lawyers, offered to provide for the child and her, offering a monthly allowance. However, Walton requested a paternity test after the child's birth to confirm he was the father. Sabrina's refusal to undergo the test hinted at her uncertainty about the child's paternity, which could have secured her substantial regular payments. Instead of accepting the proposed allowance, Sabrina demanded that Walton double the amount. When Walton refused, she launched a campaign against him. Taking to social media, Sabrina made false accusations that Walton was obsessed with her, extremely jealous of Meduni, and had even threatened them physically. She claimed that Walton had broken into their home, assaulted Meduni, traumatized their children, and sexually assaulted her in violent ways. However, her allegations were unfounded, as Walton had a solid alibi, having been in the United States since their breakup. After Walton sued her for defamation and the police threatened to take action, Sabrina stopped making accusations against her ex-boyfriend. Sabrina settled in Ossembledon, southwest London, with Meduni and their 2 children, and it seemed as though the conflict had been resolved. However, Sabrina, who was not accustomed to managing household chores and found it challenging to care for 2 children, decided to hire a nanny who could also help with the housework. She posted an online job advertisement and conducted personal interviews, but most candidates did not meet her expectations, and those who did not stay long in her household. A young French woman, Sophie Léon, responded to the job advertisement. Because Sophie was in her hometown in France at the time, the interview was conducted via video call. The 19-year-old modestly agreed to all the terms, taking care of a child, helping with household chores, and cooking, in exchange for a symbolic weekly wage of £50, including full board and lodging with her future employer. Born on January 7, 1996, in Troyes, a small town between Oise and Sens, Sophie grew up in a humble family. Her parents, Catherine and Patrick Leon, were ordinary workers struggling to make ends meet. After completing her education, Sophie earned a diploma in childcare, but she didn't want to work in her hometown. Instead, she dreamed of moving to a big city. Known for her kind and open-hearted nature, Sophie was loved by those who knew her. She was shy, quiet, and plain in appearance, and wore glasses due to poor vision, which made her a bit self-conscious. During their conversation, Sabrina identified Sophie, who seemed ordinary and unremarkable, as the perfect person to manipulate. Sophie was keen to gain experience and good references, so she was willing to work for very little money. To Sophie, Sabrina appeared to be a serious and trustworthy employer, which she mentioned to her parents before leaving for London. At first, everything seemed to go smoothly for Sophie Leonette, who innocently believed that working for the Cuiders would be a great way to start her nanny career. She quickly formed a close bond with the children, completed her household chores as specified in her contract, and had sufficient time and resources to improve her English language skills and explore the city's attractions. This peaceful period lasted for several months, and all appeared to be going well. Problems arose when Meduni lost his job, leaving the family with only one stable source of income: the monthly child support payments from Walton. Sabrina then demanded that Walton increase these payments, but he requested a DNA test to confirm his paternity first. As a result, the family struggled financially, finding it hard to afford their rent and basic necessities. Sabrina, who was unwilling to give up her luxuries and determined to maintain her socialite lifestyle, became increasingly irritable and aggressive, often taking her frustrations out on the young nanny. With their remaining funds, the couple attempted to start a bakery business, but it failed. Sabrina then turned to Walton, asking for a large sum of money to launch her clothing line, but he categorically refused. This led to tears and complaints from Sabrina about poverty. Sabrina frequently vented to Leonette about her ex-lover, and the nanny tried to console her employer. One theory claims Sabrina Quider masterminded a blackmail plot targeting Walton. She allegedly planned to frame Sophie as Walton's partner in crime and lover, planted in their home to cause chaos and put their children in danger. Sabrina supposedly believed Walton was using Sophie as a tool for revenge, motivated by the nanny's supposed infatuation with him. Quider allegedly wanted to record Sophie's fabricated confessions and present them to the police as evidence, which would be enough to demand compensation from Walton for his alleged wrongdoing. However, Sophie refused to give false statements on camera. An alternative theory, as argued by Quider's lawyers in court, suggests that due to her mental health issues, Sabrina genuinely believed in her conspiracy theory, viewing Sophie as an enemy and a threat to her family. According to this version, Sabrina didn't coerce the nanny into giving false testimony. Instead, she sincerely believed Sophie was Walton's accomplice, infiltrating their household to harm them. Sophie's life rapidly deteriorated into a living hell. She was housed in a wealthy home, but it felt like a torture chamber in the basement. At first, her employers piled extra work on her without a pay rise. Soon she was trapped in a relentless routine of chores from dawn till late at night, leaving her no personal time or freedom to leave the house. To make matters worse, her salary was stopped, and her passport was confiscated to prevent her from escaping or returning to France, effectively holding her captive. Her family contact was strictly monitored. The situation only got worse. Sophie was hardly fed and was coerced into making false accusations against Walton, a man she had never met or known. Her communication was limited to screams, insults, and threats, with accusations of theft flying her way. She was warned that she would be imprisoned if she refused to comply with their demands against the musician. Quider's used brutal tactics when threats failed. Sophie was confined to a cold basement, given scarce food, and physically abused. She grew weak and emaciated. Slaps and hair-pulling escalated to violent assaults, including a broken nose. The beatings became daily, with new cruelties designed to inflict pain. The London house basement became a torture chamber with no escape. In 2017, Sabrina took Sophie Leon, a malnourished and abused 21-year-old nanny, to a police station to testify against Mark Walton. However, when questioned, Sophie remained silent. The police, instead of helping her, allowed everyone to leave despite her obvious signs of abuse, including weighing under 88 pounds, hair loss, a missing tooth, and a limp. In mid-September 2017, Sophie Leon called her mother, Catherine, in tears, confessing that she wanted to return home but lacked the money to do so. Catherine reassured Sophie that she would buy her a ticket and told her to pack her bags immediately. Sadly, this was the last time Catherine would ever hear her daughter's voice. Just a few days later, on the evening of September 20th, 2017, the authorities were alerted by the Quider's neighbors, who had noticed a fire in the yard. What alarmed them was not the fire itself, but the overpowering, sweetly greasy smell it emitted, which one neighbor likened to the smell of burning flesh and hair, combined with something unidentifiable. The thick smoke lingered, leaving a putrid stench on clothes and skin. When firefighters and police arrived, the homeowners, who seemed strangely calm and oblivious to the reason for the emergency visit, met them after extinguishing the fire. A charred human hand was discovered in the ashes. The couple was promptly arrested, and heavily burned human remains were recovered from the fire. Although the gender and age of the deceased could not be determined initially, the body was eventually identified as Sophie Leonette, recognizable due to the melted metal frame of her distinctive glasses, which were found fused to her skull. The investigation into Sophie Leon's cause of death was highly complex due to the severe fire damage to her body. Despite these challenges, forensic experts discovered evidence of extreme physical abuse, including multiple rib fractures, jaw damage, and blunt force trauma to her skull and limbs, indicating she sustained these injuries while still alive. Further examination revealed missing teeth and severe nose damage, suggesting Sophie endured prolonged and intense beatings, resulting in broken bones and knocked-out teeth. Disturbing video recordings found in the house exposed the sadistic nature of her captors, who tortured and coerced Sophie into confessing to colluding with Walton and intending to harm the children. The videos showed her being beaten with objects such as fists, an iron cord, and a golf club, as well as being subjected to electric shock torture. Additionally, she was humiliated, forced to submerge her head in a toilet until she began to suffocate. Experts believe it is likely that Sophie died from asphyxiation before being burned, sparing her from the agony of being alive during the burning. Sabrina Quider and Wissam Medouni denied any wrongdoing and displayed no regret for their heinous act. After killing their nanny, Medouni went to a nearby supermarket where he purchased firelighter fluid to burn the body and groceries for his family's dinner, behaving as if nothing untoward had occurred. In March 2018, the court proceedings against the ruthless duo commenced. Sabrina attempted to depict herself as a victim, alleging that Mark Walton's constant harassment had pushed her into a pathological state. However, medical evaluations revealed that although Sabrina suffered from mental health issues, she was not insane and had full awareness of her actions. Wissam, who was physically fit, was psychologically dependent on Sabrina, submitting to her will and obeying her blindly. On June 26, 2018, the court delivered a guilty verdict to the couple, convicting them of torturing, humiliating, and murdering their nanny in exceptionally cruel circumstances. The court handed down life imprisonment sentences with the possibility of parole only after 30 years. Notwithstanding this, both defendants refused to accept responsibility for their actions and instead appealed to reduce their sentences. Sabrina even attempted to fake mental illness to be transferred from prison to a hospital, but this ploy was unsuccessful. Mark Walton, who attended the trial, was overcome with remorse for his ex-partner's brutal actions, which were driven by a warped desire for his attention and financial gain. He offered his heartfelt condolences to the victims' parents and spontaneously pledged a substantial donation to support the grief-stricken family who had lost their beloved daughter. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jaime Melgar. Sandra Melgar often lies in her small prison cell, reflecting on the unexpected turns her life has taken. She never thought she'd become a widow and a suspect in her husband's murder. It's unbelievable that a year and a half after his death, a grand jury indicted her, and nearly 5 years later, a jury convicted her based on circumstantial evidence alone, with no clear motive or physical proof linking her to the crime. At 59, every day since her husband's passing has been a living nightmare. In a recent interview, Sandra said that she still catches herself thinking she'll go back home. Her blue eyes were red and puffy as tears streamed down her pale cheeks. She mentioned wanting to tell him things, forgetting he's gone. It doesn't feel like he's really gone. It's like he's temporarily away or on a trip. She added that she tries not to dwell on it, before pausing tearfully. Sandra has been incarcerated at the William P. Hobby Unit, a women's prison in rural Texas, for the past 10 months. Despite her circumstances, she has managed to stay connected with her friends and family, many of whom remain convinced of her innocence. She regularly talks to her daughter, Elizabeth Liz Melgar Rose, although the noisy prison atmosphere and her soft voice often make their conversations difficult. Sandra also keeps in touch with her friends through letters, and they update her on her Pomeranian, Lola, who was present at her house on the night of the incident. Most weekends, Liz's mother, Sandra, gets to spend a couple of hours with a rotating group of friends and family, thanks to the efforts of one of her closest friends who coordinates these weekly visits. Liz acts as her mother's strongest advocate, taking it upon herself to speak on her behalf and passionately discussing what she sees as a grave injustice that has taken a devastating toll on her mother's life, depriving her of both her husband and her own freedom. Sandra is haunted by the memories of the fateful night of December 23, 2012, when her husband met his tragic end. Her inability to recall the events of that night has sparked suspicions among investigators who find it suspicious. Despite this, Sandra remains resolute in her assertion that she did not commit the crime. As Sandra lies in her prison cell, her thoughts often wander back to the evening she and Jaime had celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary on December 23, 2012. That night, Sandra Melgar was jolted awake by the incessant barking of their dogs, her vision blurred as she struggled to orient herself in the dimly lit room. Her body ached and her head throbbed as she lay on the closet floor, her hands and feet bound behind her back, her undergarments soiled. Sandra, at 5 feet 4 inches tall, attempted to stretch out her legs and roll over to look through a gap under her closet door. However, her bindings and the 2 hip replacements she had undergone restricted her movement. Even if she could manage to free herself, a chair had been placed in front of the door to block her access, with the door handle inaccessible from the outside. Inside the bedroom closet, Sandra's husband of 32 years, Jaime Melgar, lay dead, with 31 stab wounds on his hands and chest. The previously white walls of the closet were now stained with blood, and a gray telephone cord had been used to bind his feet together. A medical examiner's report confirmed that Jaime's injuries were all defensive wounds, indicating that he had fought back against his attacker rather than trying to escape. A particularly vicious blow had almost severed his right thumb, which likely caused the extensive blood spatter found in the closet and bedroom. The bedroom was in disarray, with dresser drawers open and contents scattered everywhere. Clothes, books, and pill bottles littered the floor. Sandra's black purse and red wallet had been rummaged through, and their contents were spread out on the blood-stained white comforter. A small white medic stool at the foot of the bed had bloodstains on it, suggesting it had been used as a makeshift surface for the attacker's knife. The back of a nearby wooden chair was also stained with blood. In the jacuzzi bathtub, where Sandra and Jaime had celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary the night before, several items bore witness to the tragic events. These included a white blouse, a green towel, and a silver chef knife with a 6-inch blade, all stained with blood droplets. The police later identified this knife as the murder weapon, which had been used just hours before the horrific events unfolded. Sandra and Jaime had been celebrating their 32 years of marriage with a romantic dinner at their favorite Mexican restaurant. They had planned to continue their celebration in a relaxing way, with a jacuzzi session accompanied by candles, cocktails, strawberries, and whipped cream. Even after more than 3 decades together, their love for each other remained strong, as Sandra would later tell the authorities. The couple's journey began during their senior year at Lamar High School. Jaime, with his unruly black hair and a somewhat awkward teenage mustache, was immediately drawn to the 17-year-old Sandra, who had blue eyes and blonde hair and sat in front of him in class. At first, Sandra resisted Jaime's advances for weeks, but she eventually agreed to join him and a group of friends for ice skating. Unbeknownst to her, Jaime had orchestrated the whole event, and when she arrived, only Jaime and his best friend were there. The others had mysteriously disappeared. Jaime's charming nature, humor, and penchant for corny jokes eventually won Sandra over. She admired his intelligence, thoughtfulness, and sense of humor, while Jaime appreciated her intelligence, down-to-earth personality, and lack of pretentiousness. They soon became inseparable, and in 1980, 2 years after graduating from high school, they got married in a courthouse ceremony in downtown Houston. On the anniversary of their union, Sandra and Jaime spent a romantic evening in their jacuzzi, reminiscing about their shared history and dreaming of their future together. They discussed selling their home to embark on a world tour, visiting iconic destinations like the Grand Canyon and Ireland, and witnessing the breathtaking Northern Lights. With Jaime's retirement as a computer programmer with the Houston Independent School District just 5 months away, They envisioned buying a beachfront property where they could settle down after their travels. As they chatted, they took turns giving each other massages, culminating in a romantic moment of intimacy. After 2 blissful hours in the jacuzzi, their peaceful evening was abruptly interrupted by their dogs barking. Jaime got out of the jacuzzi, wrapped a towel around himself, and put on Sandra's slippers to attend to the dogs. Little did Sandra know that this would be the last time she would see her husband alive. When Sandra woke up approximately 15 hours later, she was horrified to find herself bound and gagged in her closet, her hands and feet tied, her body sore, and her undergarments soiled. Jaime was nowhere to be found, and the frantic barking of their dogs was now accompanied by unfamiliar voices inside her home. Sandra screamed out in desperation. Jaime Melgar stood outside his brother Jaime's house, confused, just after 4:30 p.m. His brother had invited him and his family for dinner, but now, despite ringing the doorbell and calling, there was no response from Jaime or his wife Sandra. What struck Herman as unusual was that Jaime's black truck was parked in the driveway and Sandra's silver car was inside the open garage. He told his family to wait by the front door while he took a look around the backyard, glancing over the fence. Noticing the plastic tarp hanging from the pergola on the back porch, Herman remembered that Jaime had been working on various home improvement projects. Returning to the front yard, Herman decided to check the laundry room door inside the garage. To his surprise, the door was unlocked, so he entered the house. As he stepped inside, Herman was met with an unsettling atmosphere. The house was dimly lit, gray and stuffy, with all the blinds drawn shut. The dogs were barking and jumping around, which added to the eerie feeling that Herman's daughter Marissa would later describe as unsettling. It was at that moment that they heard muffled screams. Herman rushed to the back of the house and found a large chair propped against the bathroom closet door. Inside the closet, Sandra lay on the floor, wearing a black satin nightgown, desperately screaming for help. Herman and his wife Maria struggled to remove the tightly bound restraints from Sandra's arms and legs. Herman got a pair of scissors from the bathroom to help free her. Meanwhile, Sandra kept asking about Jaime's whereabouts. She had visible bruises on her arms, including a dark one on her left bicep. After they finally freed her, Sandra rushed into the bedroom and found Jaime's lifeless body protruding from the closet. She checked for a pulse, but it was clear from his cold, pale, and naked body that he had passed away. Sandra covered Jaime's body with a blue jacket, and Maria escorted her back to the bathroom. When the paramedics arrived, Sandra was in hysterics, making it difficult for her to communicate with Stephanie Roberts, the first paramedic to arrive on the scene. Roberts' report stated that Sandra was in shock, cried periodically, and had lost all sense of time. Her last memory was of around 1 a.m. that morning, unaware that 15 hours had passed and it was now evening. The police documented bruises on Sandra's hands and arms, as well as a small scratch on her left thumb, but found no blood on her. Sandra told the police that after Jaime let the dogs in, she got out of the bathtub and went to her closet to get dressed. Her next memory was waking up in the closet at an unknown time, and at some point she screamed for help, but then fell back asleep, possibly having a seizure. Sandra had several underlying medical conditions, including lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, and grand mal seizures, which had forced her to resign from her job as a licensed vocational nurse. She believed she could no longer perform her duties effectively due to her seizures. In the weeks leading up to Jaime's murder, Sandra had experienced auras, which she knew were warning signs of an impending seizure. During these seizures, she would sleep for hours and wake up in a state of confusion, disorientation, and severe pain. As crime scene investigators carefully searched the house, Sandra was taken to an interrogation room at the Harris County Sheriff's Office. She mentioned that the room was too cold and was subsequently asked to take a polygraph test. Sergeants Cazal and Douay questioned her for 3 hours, focusing on the 36 hours leading up to Jaime's death. Sandra spoke quietly and complained of a headache during the interrogation. She remembered some details clearly, such as removing her boots in the bedroom, changing in the bathroom, and recalling their conversation in the jacuzzi. However, she struggled to remember other details, and her recollection of time was imprecise. When questioned about the timeline, Sandra initially stated that Jaime had left her for 15 minutes to let the dogs in before she got out of the jacuzzi. Later, she suggested it might have been around 5 minutes. Sandra admitted that she was not good at estimating time and was making an educated guess. 2 days after the murder, Liz met with Cazal and Douay to report that several items were missing from the house, including a TV from the bedroom and Sandra's medication bottles of hydrocodone and phenobarbital. She reminded them that a backpack containing a gaming system and games had been left in the garage, which she had previously mentioned to detectives. Liz also shared information about her mother's seizures and health issues, expressing her concern for her mother's fragile state and possible post-traumatic stress. Although she hoped that something might trigger a memory later, this meeting did not yield any significant breakthroughs. Liz continued to follow up with phone calls, even pointing out damage to one of her parents' rental homes. However, the authorities eventually stopped responding to her inquiries, leaving both Liz and Sandra unaware of the investigation's progress. A year and a half after the incident, Sandra was secretly indicted for Jaime's murder by a grand jury in July 2014. Because of state law, grand jury proceedings are confidential, keeping the public unaware of the discussions and evidence presented during the process. Despite the indictment, Sandra's case progressed slowly over the next 3 years, involving at least 4 prosecutors from the district attorney's office, until it was assigned to Colleen Barnett in May 2017. Colleen Barnett had rejoined the DA's office in January of that year, following a 4-year break during Kim A's tenure as district attorney. Throughout her 24-year career, Barnett had built a reputation as a diligent and fair-minded prosecutor, according to both her colleagues and the attorneys who had opposed her in court. She had handled over 70 murder trials, including the high-profile capital murder case of Suzanne Basso, who was executed for luring a mentally disabled man to Texas with the promise of marriage and then killing him. Barnett knew that Sandra's case was tough. There was no clear motive, no confession, and no direct evidence linking Sandra to the crime. Despite the challenges, Barnett was convinced of Sandra's guilt. During the 13-day trial that began in August 2017, Barnett presented Sandra as a cold-blooded killer who carefully planned Jaime's murder, luring him into their bedroom with the promise of sex. Barnett told the jury that Sandra had used a gray telephone cord to tie Jaime's feet, then fatally stabbed him from chest to neck. The prosecutor highlighted the discovery of a bag of sex toys on the bed, which Sandra later claimed was a joke gift from a friend. Although Barnett couldn't exactly say why Sandra did it, she offered several possible motives, including Jaime's life insurance policy with HISD and Sandra's alleged desire to end their marriage. However, as a Jehovah's Witness, Sandra's religion did not allow divorce. Sandra's attorney, George Ma Sechrist, a well-established and respected legal expert, presented a contrasting image of the seemingly fragile woman sitting at the defense table. According to Sechrist, Sandra was a victim of investigators who had jumped to conclusions, forming a theory within 2 hours of arriving at the crime scene. He backed this claim by pointing out that they had initially attempted to file murder charges while the crime scene investigators were still processing her home. Sechrist emphasized the lack of physical evidence linking Sandra to the crime, highlighting the fact that her blood was not found at the scene and that she had no cuts on her hands. He offered an alternative explanation. Sandra had been the victim of a home invasion, during which she suffered a head injury and was bound in her closet while the intruders killed her husband. For the jurors watching Barnett and Sechrist in the courtroom, the atmosphere was likened to a high-stakes boxing match, as the two lawyers clashed in a battle of wits. Barnett landed a significant blow with the help of Celestina Rossi, a blood spatter expert and crime scene reconstructionist from the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office. Rossi testified that the evidence at the crime scene contradicted the idea of a home invasion. She highlighted several key points, including the absence of signs of forced entry, the untouched dresser drawers in the bedroom, and a lit candle on Jaime's nightstand, which suggested that no struggle had occurred near the closet where Jaime died. Rossi explained that most of the blood was confined to the closet, with a few exceptions, such as spatter on the back of a chair, the white medical stool, and tiny droplets on the comforter. According to Rossi, this spatter was likely caused by the injury to the artery near Jaime's thumb. Rossi concurred with the medical examiner's report, stating that all of Jaime's wounds were defensive in nature. She also noted that Jaime's loaded handgun was inches from his body in the closet, untouched. Rossi emphasized that in a situation like this, one's instinct is to try to disarm their attacker rather than shoot them, even if they are approaching with a knife. After 8 hours of deliberation spanning several days, the jury, comprising 8 men and 4 women, reached a guilty verdict for Sandra on the charge of murder, sentencing her to 27 years in prison. Although this sentence was shorter than the maximum possible 99 years, it was still a significant sentence. In explaining their decision, the jury foreman later stated that by the time Sandra would be released, she would be in her early 70s and might have the opportunity to see her grandchildren, adding that they considered this decision humane as they did not view Sandra as a threat to society. When District Judge Kelly Johnson announced the verdict, Sandra let out a loud shriek and nearly collapsed into her chair. The courtroom, filled with supporters who had been convinced that the trial was merely a formality to prove Sandra's innocence, was left in stunned disbelief. Despite attempts to reassure Sandra that everything would turn out fine, perhaps to boost their own morale, the reality of the situation suddenly became clear, and everything fell apart. Sandra, clad in a red blazer and relying on a cane, was escorted out of the courtroom, where she paused to share a final emotional hug with Liz. Once they released each other, Liz crumpled to the floor, overwhelmed by grief. Having lost both her father and mother to a justice system she felt had failed them catastrophically, Liz was left feeling utterly alone and devastated. The jury foreman staunchly defended the prosecution's case, arguing it was the most plausible explanation, despite being rooted in speculation and theory. He highlighted the discrepancies in Sandra's account and questioned the legitimacy of her alleged seizure that night. While he conceded it was possible the jury had erred, he ultimately stood by their verdict. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lorie Vallow. The case of Lorie Vallow and Chad Daybell, often to as the Doomsday Spouses, highlights crimes driven by extreme religious beliefs. Such incidents are not rare in criminal practice. Statistics show that over 100,000 people worldwide fall victim to religious fanatics annually. These victims frequently do not align with the fanatics' orthodox views. A few years ago, the disturbing of Lorie Vallow and Chad Daybell shocked the world and remain unresolved to this day. Media outlets across various countries have covered their story, leaving many horrified and puzzled. Tragically, 5 members of their own families, including 2 children, became victims. Currently, legal proceedings against these individuals are ongoing. They face capital punishment for their heinous acts. Despite this, they deny their guilt and hope to escape severe punishment or receive minimal sentences. Let's start from the beginning to try to understand this horrifying and complex story. How did people who claim to have found God completely lose their sense of humanity? Chad Guy Daybell was born on August 11, 1968 in Provo, Utah. He grew up in a simple, humble family and was known as a quiet, shy child. As a student, Chad was average. He had no notable academic or athletic achievements and was self-conscious about his weight. After finishing high school, Chad enrolled at Brigham Young University in Utah with some difficulty, but ultimately graduated in 1992 with a bachelor's degree in journalism. During his college years, he married Tammy Douglas, a modest girl, and they quickly had 5 children: sons Seth, Mark, and Garth, daughters Emma and Leah. Post-graduation, Chad worked as an editor at a local daily newspaper while balancing his role as a young father. Despite the family's ongoing financial hurdles, he took on additional roles as a night watchman at a small church and as a grave digger at the nearby cemetery. Tammy, focusing solely on household chores and raising their children, did not work outside the home. This left the family struggling to make ends meet. Recognizing the need for a change, Chad chose to apply his journalism education by writing a religious-themed book. In 1999, his first work was published. It turned out to be a collection of religious stories or fantasy narratives with religious themes. Surprisingly, the book became popular and earned him a reasonable amount of money. Given this new income stream, Chad promptly resigned from both his cemetery and newspaper jobs to focus entirely on his writing career. About 18 months later, he published another book titled 1 Foot in the Grave. This popular work detailed his experiences as a gravedigger and explored topics such as death, the afterlife, and soul reincarnations. In 2004, Chad founded his own publishing company, Spring Creek Book Company, which allowed him to self-publish his works. His books often reflected his beliefs about the imminent end of the world and Judgment Day. Over time, some observed that Chad's religious beliefs grew more extreme. He published numerous fiction and popular science books imbued with religious themes and started conducting podcasts along with audio and video lectures. These were aimed at helping individuals prepare for what he called the Second Coming of Christ. Chad described himself as an apocalyptic writer, claiming he could foresee the future and hear voices of the deceased delivering prophecies intended exclusively for him. About Lorie Vallow was born on June 26, 1973 in Loma Linda, California, a picturesque city indeed. She grew up in a big family that included 2 older brothers and 3 sisters. Her parents, Denise and Barry Cox, worked tirelessly to provide for their large brood. From an early age, Lorie had a particularly close bond with her brother Alex. They shared a trusting relationship where Alex consistently stood up for Lorie and protected her throughout their upbringing. Lorie, during her school years, emerged as a remarkable beauty with no lack of admirers. An attractive and charismatic blonde with a slender figure and a captivating smile, she enjoyed being the center of attention. She was known for her spirited and adventurous personality. In the spring of 1992, at the age of 18, Lorie married her high school sweetheart, Nelson Anes. They had begun their relationship in her senior year. However, the young couple soon realized they were not ready for family life and had rushed into marriage. Their marriage dissolved within a year, and they did not have any children together. By fall 1995, Lorie remarried, this time to a man named William Leah. A year later, they welcomed a son named Colby. Sadly, their marriage ended in 1998, just 2 years after Colby's birth. In early 2001, Lorie entered into her 3rd marriage with Joseph Anthony Ryan. He officially adopted Colby from Lorie's previous marriage. A year after their union, they had a daughter named Tylee. This marriage also collapsed by 2005. Notably, soon after her divorce from Joseph, an incident occurred when her ex-husband came to visit the children. He was assaulted by Lorie's brother Alex, who claimed he was defending his sister's honor as Ryan had allegedly insulted her. As a result, Alex Cox received a fine and served a short prison term. After divorcing her 3rd husband, Lorie met Charles Anthony Vallow and married him in February 2006. Despite the significant age difference, Charles being 17 years her senior, it did not create any obstacles for them. Charles had been previously married and had 2 teenage sons from past relationships, Zachary and Nicholas. The couple initially resided in Nevada with Lorie's children from previous marriages, while Charles's sons visited during holidays or weekends. Charles owned a small business that provided stable income to support the family. Although Lorie did not pursue further education nor work professionally, Charles never reproached her for it. In 2014, the couple officially adopted a young boy named Joshua Jackson, often referred to as JJ Vallow. JJ was Charles's grandnephew and had autism, necessitating expensive therapy that his relatives could afford. Toward the end of 2014, the family decided to move to the Hawaiian Islands, specifically to the island of Kauai. By this time, both Colby and Charles's older children were adults living independently. Thus, the Vallow family relocated to the island as a group of 4: Lorie, Charles, Tylee, and JJ. The family settled in a well-known tourist area and decided to open their own beach bar. They specialized in fresh juices, smoothies, refreshing drinks, and non-alcoholic cocktails. Despite their efforts and Charles's experience in trade, coupled with the availability of raw materials, the business quickly failed due to intense competition. Around this period, Lorie developed an interest in religious literature and was particularly drawn to a series of books titled Standing in Holy Places by Chad Daybell. She became so captivated by Daybell's views and thoughts that she appeared almost obsessed with his ideas. Lorie purchased all his works and read them daily. In 2016, the family had to leave Hawaii and return to the mainland United States. They settled in Arizona. While Charles worked hard to provide for the family, Lorie increasingly immersed herself in religion, gradually drifting away from reality. By October 2018, Lorie attended an event with her close friend Melanie in a neighboring town called Preparing a People for the Second Coming of Christ, led by Chad Daybell. As a dedicated fan and follower of Daybell's teachings, Lorie was thrilled at the opportunity to meet him in person. She sat in the front row with her eyes fixed on Chad. He also noticed her among the audience. After the event concluded, when Chad decided to personally engage with his followers, Lorie stayed behind as expected. She listened intently to everything he said and even asked if she could touch his hand. Upon doing so, Daybell looked into her eyes and claimed that they had been husband and wife in 7 previous reincarnations. Following this encounter, Chad and Lorie exchanged contact information and began communicating daily. A few weeks later, when Lorie's husband went to Nevada for work, she invited the preacher to hold a gathering at her home. On that day, about a dozen people gathered at the Vallow residence, discussing God, Judgment Day, and the Second Coming. Lorie and Chad also agreed to collaborate on preparing people for the imminent judgment. The pair began conducting podcasts devoted to this event, leading sermons and writing articles. Lorie became increasingly detached from reality and her family. Charles unfortunately did not immediately notice this change. He thought it was just a temporary obsession that would soon pass. By the time he realized how far things had gone, it was already too late. Soon after, Lorie began talking about dark spirits and zombies. She told family and friends that she was chosen by God for a special mission. Part of this mission involved destroying dark spirits, demons, and all evil. Charles's attempts to bring his wife back to reality failed. More so, she began to see him as one of the dark entities that needed to be destroyed. By the end of 2018, the marriage between Lorie and Charles Vallow was on the brink of collapse. In February 2019, during Charles's week-long business trip, Lorie changed all the locks in their shared home. Upon his return, Charles found himself locked out of his own house and noticed his personal car, the family truck, was missing, and discovered that a substantial amount of $35,000 had been withdrawn from his account. One day, Charles loudly called out for his wife and tried to enter the house. Lorie, in a frenzied state, rushed outside, hurling threats and curses. She screamed that her husband's soul had long died and his body possessed by a demon, repeatedly exclaiming, "I don't know who you are and what you've done with my husband." Without hesitation, Charles went to the police station and reported Lorie for theft and obstruction to his home and children. He expressed concerns about her threats of physical harm against him, leading to the issuance of a protective order. A court order was issued prohibiting Lorie approaching Charles. The statements Charles made that evening were documented as part of standard procedure. He spoke about his wife's excessive religious fervor, her belief in an imminent end of the world, and her tendency to classify people as either light or demonic beings. The officers, while asking clarifying questions, openly mocked him, but still issued the protective order. The next day, Charles filed for divorce and changed the beneficiary of his $1 million life insurance policy from Lorie to his mother and sister. His lawyer noted that Charles was concerned about the well-being of JJ, who required special care. He knew his mother and sister would responsibly manage the insurance payout and take care of JJ if anything happened to him. As for Tylee, her stepfather had not legally adopted her and couldn't include the legally unrelated minor in the documents. A few months later, Mr. Vallow made the regrettable mistake of revoking the protective order, hoping to reconcile with Lorie and save their marriage. He began visiting his ex-wife's home, missing the children, and remained hopeful for a family reconciliation. On July 11, 2019, Charles was fatally shot twice in the chest when he arrived to see his children. Alex Cox, Lorie's brother, called emergency services and confessed to the shooting, claiming self-defense. He alleged that Charles attacked him first with a baseball bat. In response, Alex drew a pistol and fired twice without aiming. The incident was witnessed by the homeowner and children. Their testimonies were somewhat consistent. The court ruled it an unintentional killing in self-defense. Notably, Alex's head injury was minor, despite Charles's background as a former baseball player capable of inflicting severe harm with a bat. The same day Charles's body was taken to the morgue, Lorie threw a party at the house with music, numerous guests, and a poolside disco, right where her husband had been shot and where traces of blood were still visible. She didn't arrange for his funeral or inform anyone about the incident. Charles's sons, mother, sister, and other relatives only learned about his death a week later when his unclaimed body was still in the morgue. This marked the beginning of a series of mysterious disappearances and fatalities. Shortly after her husband's demise, Lorie sold their Arizona home. Along with her children, she relocated to a town called Rexburg in Idaho. They settled close to where Chad and his wife Tammy lived. Alex Cox, Lorie's brother, also moved with them and settled in the same housing complex. Lorie enrolled her son in a school for children with special needs. However, her 16-year-old daughter Tylee did not attend any educational institution. She was seldom seen outside, leading many neighbors to be unaware of her existence. Around this time, Lorie referred to her daughter as a dark entity during a phone conversation with a friend. On September 8, 2019, the children, their mother and Uncle Alex, went to Yellowstone Park, where Chad Daybell joined them. Several photographs from that trip show Tylee, but after that day, she was never seen alive again. On September 24th of the same year, Lorie withdrew her son's documents from the school, claiming he would be homeschooled henceforth. The 7-year-old boy also was not seen afterward. Less than a month later, on October 19th, Chad's 49-year-old wife, Tammy, passed away suddenly. According to Chad, she had a cold with a cough and presumably died from respiratory failure in her sleep, with no signs of violence on her body. Her death was ruled natural. Chad categorically refused an autopsy to definitively determine the cause, a decision that oddly raised no suspicions at that time. Following his wife's sudden passing, Chad received approximately $500,000 in insurance payouts. 2 weeks later, Chad and Lorie traveled to the Hawaiian Islands, where they officially married in a beachside ceremony. This event came as a total shock and surprise to Daybell's children, who were still mourning their mother and couldn't comprehend their father's actions. Upon returning to Arizona, the couple lived together and misled others by claiming Lorie's children were with relatives, or even asserting she had no children at all. They also rented a small unit at a local storage facility, where they later moved all the belongings of the children, as if they had never existed in the home. Another month later, on December 12, 2019, Alex Cox died suddenly in his home. The cause of death appeared to be a heart attack. At his insistence, no autopsy was conducted, and the incident was deemed natural. As time passed, more people persistently questioned Lorie about the whereabouts of her children. She skillfully lied to neighbors and acquaintances, but it was more complicated with relatives. Her eldest son, Colby, who had little contact with his mother after moving away, tried earnestly to reach his younger sister. Initially, Lorie answered from her daughter's phone, pretending to be Tylee, but Colby soon sensed something was amiss. Meanwhile, Charles's relatives demanded access to JJ. They wanted to take the boy for holidays or weekends or simply talk to him on the phone. Lorie consistently refused or made up absurd excuses. Eventually, the boy's grandmother reported his disappearance to the police, and soon after, Colby also approached the police to find his younger sister. When law enforcement officers knocked on Lorie's door and asked her to bring the children for a conversation, she lied that they were visiting relatives. This information proved false, and the police returned to her home. They gave her a week to appear at the police station with the children, but instead she and her husband fled to Hawaii again. On February 20th, 2020, Lorie was arrested on the island of Kauai and taken back to Arizona. A search was conducted in her and Chad's home, but neither the children nor any signs that they had been there were found. Now her husband Chad, who had been defending her and insisting she had no children, was also under suspicion. It was only on June 9th that police discovered human remains buried in the backyard of the couple's home. Forensic analysis revealed that they were the bodies of Tylee and her younger brother JJ. Chad was immediately detained for concealing evidence and complicity. The authorities then decided to exhume the bodies of Tammy Daybell and Alex Cox to establish the true causes of their deaths. In both cases, traces of chemicals capable of inducing heart failure were discovered. This led to the conclusion that these individuals did not die naturally. The trial process for the spouses began in January 2021. They were charged with conspiring to commit first-degree criminal acts, grand theft through deceit, and insurance fraud. Additionally, the demise of Charles Vallow was reclassified from self-defense to premeditated criminal action. Witnesses in court testified that Lorie referred to her children as dark entities and promised to save their souls. There were speculations that the deaths of 16-year-old Ty and 7-year-old JJ might have had ritualistic elements. Notably, the adolescent girl's body was partially burned. Weeks before this, Chad had sent Lorie an email rating people where he assigned Tylee, the girl, a 2 as a dark spirit. Given the totality of the charges, both spouses faced the possibility of capital punishment. However, in May 2021, Val's defense team succeeded in having her declared incompetent, halting the trial process. Simultaneously, all 5 of Daybell's adult children insisted on their father's innocence, believing he was framed by Lorie and Alex. In 2022, after treatment in a psychiatric facility, Vallow was deemed fit to stand trial again and answer for her actions. In March 2023, the judge ruled out capital punishment as a sentence for her, a decision still being contested by the prosecution. In July of that same year, she was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. The trial against Chad continues, and he still faces the prospect of capital punishment. It is worth noting that this story inspired the book When the Moon Turns to Blood by investigative journalist Lily Sewell. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Tristan Borlace. On April 10, 2019, a significant tragedy occurred involving 17-year-old Tristan Borlace. This teenager, from a devout family, violently attacked and killed his relatives at their home in Deep Gap, North Carolina. On that Wednesday evening, emergency services received a call from a young woman. She reported a large amount of blood in her home and mentioned that her parents and younger brother were missing. Attempts to reach them had been unsuccessful. Police officers immediately responded to the situation, driving to the family home in Deep Gap, located near the Watauga and Wilkes County border. Upon arrival, they discovered blood on the walkway leading to the house, on the mat by the front door, and trailing inside up the stairs. As officers searched outside the home, they found a man's body covered with leaves under a hammock. The man had multiple stab wounds. Later that night, at about 10:30 p.m., authorities found the family's pickup truck concealed in the woods. Inside was the woman's body, covered with a blanket and bags of mulch placed on top of her. Jeffrey Borlace, Tristan's father, was born on April 16, 1975. He served as pastor of Pist Bible Fellowship Church, a conservative Protestant movement with Mennonite roots. Tristan grew up in an environment emphasizing personal piety and constant awareness of God's watchful eye. Serious Bible study sessions and moral instructions formed the basis of his upbringing. Even entertainment like laughter or colorful clothing was frowned upon within this community. Things such as good works, charity, missionary work, love for one's enemies, and renunciation of all forms of violence were highly valued virtues. Jeffrey upheld these principles as well, since he was raised under similar circumstances by Pastor Harry Borlace. As a boy and young man, Jeffrey exemplified kindness, gentleness, and patience. During his youth as a young adult man, Jeffrey worked at Big Surf Water Park located on Lake of the Ozarks in Missouri during summer breaks from schooling routines back then. On his first day of work, the young man encountered a charming and meek girl named Tanya Mae Trandom. She was of the same age, had similar views, and shared almost identical upbringing with him. Tanya, like Jeffrey, was raised in a family where Christian values were of utmost importance. A patient and humble girl, she saw in the devout man an ideal future husband and a caring father. She gave Jeffrey a picture of an elderly couple holding hands and remarked, "That will be us one day." Jeffrey's mother, Kathy Brown, prayed earnestly that God would bless her son with a wife who loved the Lord wholeheartedly. She believed her prayers were answered when Jeffrey met Tanya. The young couple married and continued living according to the values they were taught in their own families. The photo presented by Tanya was carefully preserved in their family album. Soon after their marriage, the couple welcomed their first child, an adorable girl named Taylor. Not long after Taylor's birth came 3 more children, the youngest being a son named Tristan. Taylor embraced her role as the eldest sibling wholeheartedly. She took care of her brothers and sisters, constantly supporting them. Among all her siblings, she had a special bond with her younger brother Tristan. Despite their age difference, they were inseparable. Jeffrey and Tanya held firm beliefs about parenting, viewing it as their mission to instill Christian values in their children's hearts. As their 4 children grew older, they decided to extend their family further by adopting 4 more boys from an orphanage. Open-hearted and loving according to others' descriptions, their family expanded to include 8 children: Taylor, twins Kay and Alexis, Misery, Ale, Stephen, Miku, and Tristan. In line with the family's religious beliefs, children were not permitted to use cell phones or social networks until reaching a certain age. They emphasized simplicity in needs and desires as well. Additionally, boys were forbidden to engage in romantic relationships until they completed high school at 18 years old. Bible study sessions and other religious activities were mandatory components of their upbringing. Despite these guidelines rooted in asceticism and discipline, the children grew up like any other boys and girls, with love and support from their devoted parents, guiding them along the way. Parents made no distinction between native and adopted children. They all received the same attention, care, and affection. The loving mother fostered a harmonious atmosphere, carefully monitoring the internal relationships among brothers and sisters. She prayed frequently and engaged in various good deeds. The couple believed in nurturing virtue through their actions and instilled mercy in their children by setting an example. When a hurricane struck Haiti, Tanya sold her expensive wedding ring and donated the proceeds to a foundation dedicated to building housing for the victims. In place of her costly ring, she acquired a simple, modest one. In 2015, Taylor graduated from high school and moved to Boone to attend Appalachian State University. This event was particularly difficult for Tristan, as he lost his closest companion and found himself alone. Although Taylor returned home at every opportunity, she now had her own independent life, leaving Tristan with the same old rules and routines that he'd always opposed. Tristan had long rebelled against the restrictions his parents imposed since childhood and disagreed with their religious views. He was particularly frustrated by the lack of a cell phone and the inability to connect with peers on social networks, an integral part of modern teenage life. After Taylor's departure, quarrels with his parents increased. In December 2017, there were significant changes within the family's life. Jeffrey, his wife, and their children moved to a new house with a large lot in Deep Gap, Watauga County, North Carolina. The house was situated on a dirt road leading into a wooded area and offered much more space than their previous home. Additionally, it was located just under 2 miles from Robin's residence, Tanya's mother and the children's grandmother, making it easy to seek her help when needed for looking after the youngest children. He attended the local high school and began participating in and field. Other kids took jobs as counselors at summer camps. At first glance, it might have seemed that there was never any trouble in the Borlace household. Over time, Tristan's behavior became troubling. In 2018, the school insisted on several consultations with a psychologist due to anger issues and a lack of control. By 2019, when Tristan was in high school, he started having trouble understanding some school subjects. These difficulties grew with each passing day. From being a diligent student who always participated in school activities before the move, he turned into an indifferent and withdrawn teenager with a lack of interest in his studies. Tristan began arriving late for lessons and showed no desire to learn at all. It got to the point where he would put his headphones on during class and sit with an absent expression. Some teachers tried to help Tristan, and he even made contact, but everything ended with unchanged indifference. At home, Tristan's behavior also became a concern. By this time, he had everything but constantly argued with his parents about his cell phone and access to social networks. He spent considerable time on the internet. On his Instagram account, he referred to himself as a musician. His sister Taylor remained interested in her siblings' lives and noticed that Tristan quarreled more frequently with their parents and argued about religious topics with their mother. She also learned of his other problems at school. The sister attempted to talk to her brother, but realized their former closeness was gone. After some time, Tristan befriended a girl from the religious community named Evelyn Faith Jackson. They began meeting without particularly observing prohibitions on intimate relations. Sometimes they even smoked forbidden substances together. Tristan expressed complaints about his mother's nightly discussions regarding his behavior, which left him feeling tired and unable to concentrate in school. The young man grew very concerned that many of his faults caused him not to live up to his mother's expectations. She can't take pride in him, told that he can be himself with his father, but it's different with his mother. On April 10, 2019, a lot of secrets from Tristan's life came to light. Surveillance cameras were installed in the barn. Tristan's old cell phone, which he occasionally used without his parents knowing, was used as an access point. On this particular day, Tanya took the phone for some reason and discovered text messages indicating her son was having inappropriate conversations with girls and discussing illegal drugs. Tristan was at school when he noticed his phone blinking with incoming messages. His shocked parents confronted him through a family chat about what they had found on the old phone. That same day, Sher King, an English teacher in Tristan's class, called his mother to complain about his grades and behavior. During the trial, it was revealed that Tanya Borlace had called Miss King back, informing her that she and her husband would soon come to the school to pick Tristan up to discuss his academic performance. Miss King conveyed this message to Tristan, who was quite surprised by the news. The couple left their youngest child with his grandmother and headed to the middle school to address these issues. The ride home was silent. At trial, Tristan testified that his mother appeared tense and frowned frequently while going through his phone. A conversation ensued at home for about an hour and a half. Afterward, Tanya texted her mother stating that although they had taken away Tristan's phone and car keys until his grades and behavior improved, he did not seem upset by this. She informed her mother that she would be coming soon to pick up the younger child. This message was sent at 4 p.m., after which it seems the discussion continued. From Tristan's account, he and his mother talked about the importance of doing well in school and maintaining cleanliness at home. He was forced to listen and realized there was a lot in him needing correction. They even made a list of qualities should develop to become a better person: compassion, honesty. This list would later be found by the police. At one point, Tristan said his mother approached him from behind, put her arm around his neck, and applied pressure. He instinctively jumped up, turned around, and accidentally her. According to him, his mother had never done anything like that before, so he reacted that way. His mother was startled by the blow, grabbed what he thought were scissors from a shelf, and moved toward her son. In shock at what was happening, he stabbed her thinking he was defending himself and ran to his father for help. Later forensic examination found no evidence on Tristan's neck, indicating his mother strangled him. During the trial, the prosecution showed photos of Tristan Borlace's neck taken by the medical examiner that displayed a broken neck bone. On the other hand, the psychologist would explain during the trial that in his opinion Tristan Borlace was mentally sane at the time of the crime, but suffered from a severely impaired cognitive state. He was experiencing depersonalization, derealization, and felt events were unreal. However, the court and jury, they would disregard the psychologist's opinion, finding Tristan to be a skillful manipulator and socially dangerous individual. According to Tristan, he did not understand what was happening, or why his father was running away from him, or why he stabbed him when he caught up even though he begged for help. He remembered his father picking up a rock saying, "Tristan, don't," but thought his father would rather let him be killed than try to harm him. Neighbors later reported hearing loud screams on the Borlace property at about 5:30 p.m. that Wednesday. After it was over, Tristan returned to the house where he vomited, indicating severe stress, not cold-blooded, calculated murder in the psychologist's opinion. The jury disagreed with the psychologist's opinion because they had seen the forensic medical examiner's reports during the trial. Jeffrey B.'s autopsy report detailed multiple stab wounds to his left chest back, slash wounds his arms and hands, and abrasions his skull and forehead. Tanya Borlace's autopsy report showed that she had multiple wounds in her left chest and arm, while as injuries likely sustained from neck compression. These findings suggested that the parents were defending themselves rather than attacking. Tristan had an opportunity to escape from his mother if he felt threatened. Even if the mother experienced a sudden lapse of judgment or misperceived self-defense, the father's murder and subsequent actions appeared different. Tristan returned home, removed his mother's body, placed it in a truck under a tarp, cleaned the crime scene for about an hour, and even used a hose to wash down the porch. Around 8:30 p.m., Tristan went to his grandmother's house to pick up his younger brother. His brother Robin thought this was very strange. Tristan explained that his parents urgently needed to go to the store and apologized for not having time to stop by to pick up his brother. About 20 minutes later, Robin received a call from another grandson who complained that their parents were not answering the phone and hadn't come to pick him up from work as usual. Grandma called Alexis and asked her to retrieve her brother. They agreed to meet at Jeffrey and Tanya's house to figure out what had happened. When they arrived at the house, Robin noticed blood on the porch, but wasn't overly concerned since the couple raised animals there. She went inside to get a flashlight to check on them and discovered blood everywhere. At this point, Alexis ran into the house reporting she found some kind of body under a hammock near the animal barn and thought she saw Tristan with blood on his face in a getaway car. Alexis called emergency services. The operator instructed her and all family members to lock themselves in the car and wait for the police. The police arrived 10 minutes later. After several hours of waiting outside and talking to officers, they were taken to the station where they were informed that Jeffrey and Tanya Borlace had been found dead. While examining the crime scene, detectives found a computer interface in the home. It connected the video surveillance system inside the house to the monitors. Detectives saw a screen with a grid of various cameras broadcasting live video feeds. They immediately requested a warrant to obtain credentials from the servicing company. Meanwhile, Tristan contacted his girlfriend Evelyn and went over to her home. She noticed he seemed worried and had a few scratches on his forehead and arms. Tristan assured her that he had only argued with his parents and got the scratches while playing with his dog. Evelyn described Tristan's injuries: 3 scratches on his forehead, a wound on his hand, a cut on his finger, and a bruised fingernail. Right after the crime, Tristan posted a photo of his injuries on Snapchat, saying he was hurt by his father's dog. According to Evelyn, this photo matched what she saw that evening. Tristan stayed over that night. The next morning, they went to Walmart and McDonald's, but decided against going to school. Evelyn thought Tristan just wanted some time away from his parents, so she suggested staying with one of her relatives for a while. He agreed, and they traveled to another state. On April 11th, Sheriff's Office personnel obtained the username and password to the Borlace home's video surveillance system. After reviewing the camera footage, they learned about the circumstances of the crime. Police obtained a warrant for Tristan's arrest and turned over details about their vehicle. He allegedly drove away to the National Crime Information Center. A search of the car began, and soon after, a chase ensued. Investigator Matthew received intel that Tristan had been spotted in Tennessee and quickly began the paperwork necessary to catch the alleged perpetrator. He requested Robin, Tristan's grandmother, to accompany him during the apprehension so he could speak to Tristan in her presence due to his young age. As they were driving with Evelyn, Tristan noticed blue lights trailing them. He accelerated and told his friend that his parents must have registered the car as stolen to locate him. Speeding down the highway, he tried to evade capture, but eventually pulled over when he couldn't escape his pursuers any longer. The Ford was quickly surrounded by police cars. Evelyn was utterly confused upon witnessing her boyfriend being handcuffed and taken away in a squad car. The officers observed that Tristan did not appear particularly upset or agitated. On April 11, 2019, investigator Matthew conducted an interview with Tristan. It was both videotaped and audio recorded. The young man answered all questions, confessed to the crime, and detailed his actions in full, occasionally breaking into tears. Tristan Borlace, who was just a month shy of his 18th birthday, was taken into custody without bail. Shortly thereafter, the sheriff's office secured a warrant to search Tristan's Snapchat account, along with 5 cell phones that could contain pertinent information related to the crime. Another warrant was issued for the Orchard Road home, where detectives discovered another phone in the master bedroom, alongside various items including a keyboard, pen from a safe, paper cups, hammer, straw, knives, red-stained swab eyeglasses, kitchen towel hammock, digital video recorder, rug, and miscellaneous papers, South Dakota cards, boots. According to court documents, a search warrant was also issued for the Ford F-150 truck, where investigators seized a red-stained swab laptop, top computer charger, and steering wheel cover. Additionally, authorities obtained a warrant to search the home of Tristan's girlfriend in Boone, since he had spent the night at her house. Court documents state that a pillowcase, a zippered sweatshirt, and a notebook were seized from the property. The findings from the investigations and searches enabled investigators to piece together the chronology of events in great detail. The claim of self-defense was found to be untenable. Funeral services for the couple took place on April 17, 2019, at Bible Fellowship Church, with pastors William C.R. and Brad Gray officiating the ceremony. The children, grappling with the loss of their parents at such a young age, managed to write an emotive obituary. Our parents never got the opportunity to live for themselves because they always lived for us. Jeff and Tanya have always brought immense joy and pride to their parents. Our parents made the world a better place, and we aim to continue that legacy by passionately loving people and pursuing faith. After the funeral, Taylor visited her brother in prison for the first time and was taken aback by his demeanor. Tristan showed no remorse and attempted to lay blame on the family for the incident. To his sister, it appeared he believed he would regain his freedom eventually. Disgusted, Taylor left. Her second visit was on May 11th for Tristan's birthday, accompanied by Grandma Robin. However, this meeting fared no better than the last. Her brother boasted about a party thrown for him in prison to celebrate his birthday, a behavior Taylor found unacceptable considering their parents' tragic death. Following this visit, the family decided to sever all contact with Tristan. The trial began on February 16, 2022. During proceedings, Tristan expressed regret for what had transpired and concurred with everything his family had said about him. He supported a permanent ban on contact to ensure his family's sense of safety. On March 3rd, Tristan Borlace was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole for each count of first-degree murder. Judge Horn noted that mental health issues were considered as somewhat mitigating factors during sentencing. According to the psychologist's report, Tristan Borlace continues to suffer from anxiety, depression, and exhibits symptoms consistent with post-traumatic stress disorder. However, Judge Horn noted that the psychologist found no indication of psychotic disorders. Although the anxiety and depression may have been exacerbated by continued drug use, what's particularly unusual in this case is that neither Tristan's family, nor his lawyer, nor he himself provided any statements about his motives behind the crime. Here we have a perplexing situation: a devout family with a socially dangerous individual who abused illegal drugs and couldn't fully grasp or articulate the reasons for his actions. On one hand, there's a young man with low self-esteem who exhibits symptoms of anxiety and hasn't received adequate medical care. During the court session, it was mentioned that his mother helped him cope with panic attacks since she experienced them herself. One foundational principle of certain educational theories posits that children burdened with original sin are inherently immoral from birth. Therefore, education must correct them by imposing strict discipline and suppressing their self-awareness. This so-called strict love is supposedly beneficial for children. Tristan might have had an inherited overreactivity of the nervous system and grew up under stringent limits, constantly feeling inadequate as a devout individual. Some require more love, while others require less. According to recollections shared by his older sister, Tristan was intensely jealous of new siblings who diverted parental attention away from him. Initially rebellious, he then sank into depression and feelings of worthlessness, compounded by illicit drug use and subsequent panic attacks, as well as depersonalization, derealization states. He couldn't embrace his parents' devotion to their faith and couldn't meet his mother's expectations or align with what she envisioned for him, which required correction. Instead of securing a competent therapist's assistance as needed, changes were listed together by him and his mother. This approach may have missed critical opportunities to address underlying issues. Could this senseless and tragic event have been avoided in a truly loving family? That remains uncertain, a question echoic in the aftermath.